Order.
I'll be doing the Lord's Prayer. You can follow in your language as well. No hwyti jejit na gwaldrig nuri shri juju dinu no hwek gwadet na jujit nienji jejit quick nan kakakot gonji jitrinjit na hwena chitриndo liquid naja no shi no twandu no at uan kuchimi nitswai na twandu no at angedin goats at uan kuchitili go kundai goods at no hwetunu esho good twandu goods at no hwenaunji What units anili cook aquadet I hakwen quantit shikako shikenjit. Amen. Hi.
For the guide opening prayer today. Before we get into today's business, colleagues, I'll now bring my ruling on the point of privilege raised last week. A member from Yellowknife South rose on a point of privilege regarding a social media post made by the member for Range Lake. I will not rehash the social media post in question or the debate in this chamber on the point of privilege. However, for those who participated in the debate, thank you. You have given me many things to consider. When a point of privilege is raised, I must consider two things. First, was a point of privilege raised at the earliest opportunity? Second, on the face of it, is there a question of privilege? This is also called prima facie case of privilege. I've decided the member from Yellowknife South did raise the issue at the earliest opportunity. However, this does not meet, oops, sorry. Mixed up my paper. However, the case does not meet the test for a question of privilege. There is no prima facie case of privilege. Colleagues, our privilege as members of this Legislative Assembly are important. They are based on our parliamentary traditions and rules. These privileges protect us when we represent our constituents. We could not operate without this privilege, or these privileges. In this case, I consider two privileges we enjoy as members. The first is question of freedom of speech. In our proceedings, we can speak freely. Only our rules limit what we can say. In this case, the words were not spoken in our proceedings. Had they been, they would have been ruled out of order. If you are following our rules, your words in this chambers are protected. Outside this chambers, including on social media, they are not. Remember, there can be real consequences to words spoken or typed outside of our proceedings. Although I did not find it in this case, statements made out this assembly easily could have been found a question of privilege. Should a similar situation happen again, my ruling could be different. In fact, my ruling in this case may have been different had another member raised the point of privilege. The second privilege I consider is our freedom from obstruction and intimidation in our duties as elected representatives. The members for Yellowknife South was not impaired in her ability to carry out her duties as a member. The social media posts in question did not impact the member's ability to move forward and advance the 2025-2026 main estimates. We continue to review these estimates in Committee of the Whole. Additionally, conversations continue between regular members and members of the Executive Council, including the member in her capacity as Minister of Finance. Colleagues, this is a second point of privilege. I repeat, this is a second point of privilege ruling in a short period of time. Previous point was ruled upon at the beginning of the sitting. This is concerning. I do not discourage you from raising on a point of privilege. If your privileges are being interfered with, I want to hear about it. I cannot stress how important our privileges are in this institution. Colleagues, the points of privilege and points of order raised lately are concerning. The people we represent in this assembly are also concerned about the behavior that they're seeing. And I've been spoken to numerous times on the street here and in my own riding. I expect more of you as members of this legislative assembly. The people who elected us do too. We're here to work together for the benefit of all people of this territory. We were not elected to quarrel and bicker. This isn't what our people expect or need. There will be times when you will not see eye to eye. That is to be expected. It is part of the healthy tension that exists between regular members and cabinet. However, this tension is not an excuse to be rude or misrepresent information. We all deserve to be given a fair opportunity to do our job representing our people. Colleagues, as your speaker, I am asking you to step up, do your part to ensure this. I do not discourage, to ensure this institution is respectful, efficient, effective place of debate. It should be. I expect you to behave in a way Northerners would be proud of. In our consensus government structure, we hold ourselves and each other to a higher standard. As long as I am your speaker, I will expect each of you to strive for this higher standard. Further, I expect improvements in how we treat each other inside and outside this chamber. College, I'd like to thank you for your attention. Before we move on to the reports of the day, I will provide my ruling on the point of order raised by the member of Yellowknife North against the member of Yellowknife Centre on a later date. Now, let's get down to business. Minister statements. Minister of Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, investing in our roads, bridges, airports and highways is critical to keep communities connected, improve safety and support economic growth. Whether it is making sure families can travel safely, helping businesses move goods, or supporting emergency response, strong transportation infrastructure is essential for all Northerners. Mr. Speaker, crews have already been working across the territory over the last year to improve road conditions and safety, and I have a few examples to highlight. Highway 1, the Mackenzie Valley Highway, received about 39 kilometres of chip seal overlay, and work is underway to widen embankments and improve drainage. Highway 3, the Yellowknife Highway, received 89.5 kilometres of chip seal overlay and surface repairs to major dips that are scheduled for this summer. Highway 4, the Ingram Trail, sections of the highway underwent embankment widening and culvert replacements, and work will again be continuing in the summer of 2025. Highway 7, the Liard Highway, extensive rehabilitation work has begun, including chip seal overlay, road widening, clearing, ditching, culvert replacement, and this is a multi-year project that continues until 2026. And finally, Highway 10, the Inuvik to Tuktoyaktuk Highway, crews focused on seasonal maintenance, including soft shoulders, washboarding, and culvert work. This season, rehabilitation work will begin, continuing over the next few years. In total, more than 150 kilometres of chip seal overlay was completed across Highways 1, 3, and 7. Mr. Speaker, access roads are lifelines for smaller communities, and we continue to invest in their improvement as well. Significant upgrades have been completed or are underway in this area. Improvements to the Wati Access Road were completed this summer, while the Ray Access Road received resurfacing and new chip seal. Rehabilitation work began on the Liard Access Road, including chip seal, road widening, clearing, ditching, and culvert replacement, and this multi-year project will continue until 2026. And lastly, Prohibition Creek Access Road, a key piece of the future Mackenzie Valley Highway, opened for year-round traffic this past fall. Our bridges and crossings are just as critical. The Northwest Territories has 115 bridges and 247 bridge culverts across all of our all-weather and winter road systems. GNWT bridge engineers regularly inspect all structures to ensure safety and reliability. Mr. Speaker, major bridge projects include the following. The Decho Bridge, which received critical repairs to a broken cable and all connecting pins were replaced. The bridge reopened to regular two-lane traffic in early February. Replacement work on the Jean Marie River Bridge will begin this summer and is expected to be completed by the fall of 2026. And work will begin on the Red Knife River this summer to replace culverts with a permanent bridge and should be completed by the fall of 2026. Beyond maintenance, we are investing in the future of our transportation network. The Mackenzie Valley Highway continues to advance with the Prohibition Creek Access Road marking a key milestone, and of course, we are currently undergoing an environmental assessment. And DECA Frank Channel Bridge replacement project is also moving forward. We've recently held public engagements and sessions in Betchaco, and we're using the feedback to help shape future plans. Construction is expected to begin this fall. Mr. Speaker, aviation plays a vital role in the North, and investments in airport infrastructure are key to maintaining a strong and reliable transportation system. The Yellowknife Airport is developing a strategic plan to guide long-term sustainability and future capital improvements. This includes fleet renewal, accessibility upgrades, geotechnical studies on the airport's runways, and ongoing discussions with the Department of National Defence about their potential investments through the North American Aerospace Defence Command, or NORAD, modernization program. In Inuvik, the Mike Zubko Airport is undergoing a federally funded runway expansion to support Northern Air sovereignty operations. The runway is being extended by 3,000 feet to accommodate modern military aircraft, including F-35 fighter jets. Additional upgrades include widening the runway safety area and improving drainage to address permafrost degradation, modernizing lighting, navigation, and military landing systems, resurfacing of the existing runway pending funding approval. This project is expected to be complete by 2029, with paving and electrical work scheduled in 2027 following permafrost stability assessments. Mr. Speaker, maintaining infrastructure in the North comes with unique challenges. Climate change, extreme weather, permafrost degradation all impact our roads, highways, and airports. And that is why we continue to work with Indigenous governments, Indigenous organizations, academic institutions, and federal partners to develop innovative and sustainable solutions to keep our transportation system resilient. These investments reflect our government's commitment to build a safer, more efficient, and better connected Northwest Territories. I want to thank the engineers, the contractors, the maintenance crews, everyone who works hard to make these projects possible. Their efforts ensure that residents, businesses, and visitors can travel safely and reliably. And together, we will continue strengthening our transportation network for today and for the generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Infrastructure. Minister statements. Minister for Municipal and Community Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, effective emergency management and preparedness are critical to the safety and well-being of Northwest Territories residents. Today I want to recognize individuals and groups whose dedication and efforts have helped keep the NWT communities safe. The Emergency Management Exemplary Service Award is a national recognition for outstanding contributions to emergency management. Federal, provincial, and territorial ministers present this award to highlight efforts in prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. This year's NWT recipients are the Department of Environment and Climate Change's hydrology team, consisting of Sean Coquel, Ryan Cannon, and Anna Coles. Since 2021, the hydrology team has played a vital role in flood preparedness by providing critical updates to GNWT communities and residents. Using satellite imagery, hydromatic gauges, and live camera feeds, they monitor ice conditions and water levels, regularly reporting the risks to support emergency planning. These expertise and commitment have been instrumental in response to severe flooding events. Mr. Speaker, I commend the hydrology team on this well-deserved recognition and personally thank them for their above and beyond dedication to the public safety. Mr. Speaker, the NWT community governments are on the front lines when disaster strikes, and the Government of Northwest Territories remains committed to supporting their preparedness efforts. In April 2024, we updated the NWT emergency plan to better define roles and responsibilities of community governments as they lead in emergency management. The updates confirm our mandate's commitment to ensuring emergency management and preparedness initiatives strengthen our capacity to respond to more frequent and severe climate-driven disasters and other emergencies. In addition, Mr. Speaker, a new Incident Command System, or ICS training, plan is underway, aiming to train up to 10% of the Government of the Northwest Territories workforce to assist during major emergency events. Additionally, we continue supporting community governments in updating emergency plans and preparedness activities. The Government of Northwest Territories also conducts an annual Be Ready campaign to educate residents on the risk, personal responsibility, and practical steps to be prepared when an emergency is evident. Mr. Speaker, while progress has been made, there is more to do. Recent disasters have had lasting impacts, with recovery taking years. We must continue to enhance our efforts in mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery to help communities rebuild quickly and effectively. Success depends on the strong collaboration at all levels: individuals, non-government organizations, communities, Indigenous governments, and the Government of the Northwest Territories. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I want to acknowledge the dedication of first responders, community governments, GNWT employees, non-government organizations, and all partners who work tirelessly to keep our residents safe. Once again, congratulations to the hydrology team and their well-earned recognition. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs. Minister statements. Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to advise the House that the Honourable Member for Hay River North, the Premier, will be absent from the House today due to illness. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Deputy Premier. Minister statements. Minister statements. Member statements. Member statements. Member from Range Lake.
Mr. Speaker, Donald Trump's illegal tariffs on Canadian exports come into place tomorrow. We were optimistic in our hopes that diplomacy was an option, but unfortunately, no matter how unlawful, unwarranted, or irrational these tariffs may be, they are the new reality for our country. After decades of friendship, the American president has betrayed our values of mutual benefit to initiate a bitter trade war where any cooperation between nations has become purely transactional. The United States has become a bully akin to Russia or North Korea, using threat and intimidation to pursue their foreign policy. Therefore, we must now pivot as the Northwest Territories and Canada towards a new economic strategy that focuses on securing our future and markets elsewhere in the world. While Northerners have felt left out of the great national debates in the past, on the topic of Canada's economic future, we find ourselves front and center because we have the critical resources the world needs. We have copper for electrical wiring, tungsten for hardened tools, nickel and zinc the steel industry could not go without. Recently, we have also discovered lithium and cobalt deposits vital for producing batteries and alloys, and plenty of rare earth minerals which are highly sought after by specialized tech industries around the globe. These vast deposits of critical minerals will, once developed, grant Canada resource sovereignty needed for self-sufficiency and opening the door to new markets around the world. Most importantly, they will provide us with the strategic leverage required to negotiate better trade terms with the United States. More locally, these industries will certainly kickstart our economy back into high gear with employment opportunities our communities need and revenues the quality of our public services rely on. Yet, there are still many hurdles we must overcome as we set our future into motion. We've heard from Indigenous governments and industry leaders that our regulatory system is prohibitive, our permitting timelines glacial, and consultations inadequate. The infrastructure needed to unlock our more remote regions is limited, and the capital costs to get these projects off the ground are high. However, these challenges are not insurmountable. We just need to find the political will. The only question now is, are we ready to take the lead to keep Canada's north true and strong and free, or will we let the moment slip by as more mines lay dormant for the foreseeable future? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member from Range Lake. Member statements. Member from Yellowknife North.
Mr. Speaker, we've talked a lot about energy initiatives in this House, renewable energy projects, opportunities for local gas development, but we hardly ever talk about energy efficiency, how we can help community members and local businesses avoid using so much energy in the first place. Too often, when we're tightening our belts, we consider energy initiatives as a luxury we can't afford. Mr. Speaker, wasting energy is a luxury we can't afford. In each year's budget, we devote more and more millions to energy subsidies, electricity rate subsidies, seniors' home heating subsidies, fuel subsidies for communities in crisis, such as Norman Wells. These offer much-needed relief, but they don't address any of the root causes of high energy costs, leaving the government on the hook for ever-increasing subsidies. We could reduce the amount of subsidies needed by ramping up our energy efficiency rebates and incentives. The Arctic Energy Alliance has been busy delivering these kinds of programs in all NWT communities and can point to many successful case studies. For example, a family in Yellowknife took their 1970s-era trailer and added insulation, sealed up air leaks, and replaced old windows, saving them over $6,000 per year in utility costs and paying back their investment in only around 6 years. The Arctic Energy Alliance also helped a family in Fort Liard buy an energy-efficient washing machine, which is saving them $50 a month on water bills, plus lower electricity bills for the dryer. AEA has worked with 13 communities, including Sigitchik, Delaney, and Gamity, to replace old wood stoves with more efficient ones that use 50% less wood. They're also way more convenient, and I know because I have one myself, they burn longer, so you can get up in the morning and it's still burning 12 hours later. A new wood stove represents about $3,000 a year that people don't have to spend on heating oil. With sunsets in federal funding, we have significantly reduced our rebate programs, leaving more and more folks choosing inefficient furnaces, boilers, and appliances because they seem cheaper upfront, but it's costing them much more in the long run. It's also costing the climate and costing this government. We are sliding backwards. Mr. Speaker, failing to support our residents and businesses with energy efficiency is a luxury we cannot afford. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North. Member statement, member from Mofwee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Adequate supports for seniors. Mr. Speaker, many elders want to stay in their homes for as long as they can. This is their right, Mr. Speaker. However, this can be difficult because the cost of living is high for Northerners, and especially for seniors with limited incomes. Mr. Speaker, some JNWT programs already help elders, but these programs need to be revised to provide more financial support. One example is the senior home heating subsidy, which provides financial assistance to NWT residents who are 60 years of age or older, who reside in a home that they own or are renting a self-contained unit. The program provides $460 to $750 depending on where you live. The amount of the subsidy is based on income. Mr. Speaker, I know elders who are receiving home heating bills in the thousands. The fuel subsidy is not enough. These people receive a fixed income and need more help. Families are forced to consider moving elderly parents into senior home for cost saving alone. This is not right, Mr. Speaker. We should have supports in place to help elders. It should not come down to cost saving. Many senior residents are still able to work and take on jobs for extra income. But this can be punitive, punishing, as it can disqualify them from JNWT programs. Mr. Speaker, I think this government needs to look at how it is treating elders in the NWT and how they can provide better supports. I know Minister of Education is not here, but when she returns, I will have questions for her. Thank you.
Member from Mopui. Member statements. Member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to share some words from Dr. Julia Christensen that hit me like a ton of bricks on the weekend. Dr. Christensen is someone I grew up with. We sang in the Yellowknife Youth Choir for many years. She is best known these days for her work in critical research of Northern governance, especially issues surrounding home and homelessness in the Canada's North. These are her words that I share today with her consent. Quote, I can be concerned about the current threats to Canadian sovereignty and also see it as an opportunity for Canadians to reflect on the long-standing violence of refusal of Indigenous sovereignties by settlers colonial Canada. Canadian sovereignty has been built upon the dispossession of Indigenous land and the denial of Indigenous self-determination and sovereignty. We are at a critical point wherein our collective resistance to threats from the south of the border, we need to simultaneously reckon with how Canadian assumptions of sovereignty have been built upon terra nullius and the exclusion of Indigenous legal orders. We are standing in a place of incredible opportunity for solidarity building, land back, and decolonization if we are willing to take it and do the work. End quote. I urge this House to do this critical work together with Indigenous governments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Member from Great Slave. Member statements. Member from Lesotho.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Assembly colleagues heard me speak on the Fort Good Hope Construction Centre on numerous occasions. Mr. Speaker, last week, it gives me great privilege as a proponent. Neratin Developments of Fort Good Hope seen deliveries of 3 modular homes over the Winter Road for a total of 6. This achievement produces results for 2 issues. Number 1, the housing demand and meeting that demand. Number 2, costs for the modular homes including transportation. This data will help. Mr. Speaker, this is wonderful news to see the private sector addressing the NWAT's housing crisis. This cost data will assist management with additional knowledge for local construction cost once the construction center is up and producing modular homes, and outside comparable to outside costs of construction, particularly transportation. Mr. Speaker, my Winter Road midterm season resupply review raises the questions on housing NWAT Sahtu resupply. Mr. Speaker, critical to ensuring the Sahtu communities can feel in comfort knowing their community fuels, groceries, materials is delivered. Mr. Speaker, as you can understand, the mild weather has created a high level of unease. Mr. Speaker, the Sahtu is on the last month of their annual affordable Winter Road resupply. The soft snow texture will see rapid road surface deterioration. This will extend the trucking turnarounds on the delivery of these materials. Later, Mr. Speaker, I will have questions to the Minister of Housing and NWAT. Masi.
Thank you, Member from Lesotho. Member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today I would like to reiterate my concerns for the Dempster Highway conditions between Wrangling River and Inuvik. Since the fall of 2024, just before the ground was beginning to freeze, I brought up the concerns and safety of this section of the highway. I bring this concern up again because of the safety of the users. We have local traffic and semi-truck users on this section of the highway on a daily basis, and their safety when driving that Dempster Highway should be a priority to this government. As it is starting to warm up again, the highway conditions are starting to worsen, and I am starting to get calls about the upgrade and maintenance of section of the highway. Mr. Speaker, last week an empty tanker heading south jumped off the highway because of the condition around the Wrangling River. It is fortunate that the tanker was empty and there was no environmental concerns to the water and or land or any harm to the occupant of the tanker. Local contractors were able to pull the tanker out after a few days. This section of the highway must be given priority for the safety of all users because tourist season is fast approaching and the highway will be very busy this spring and summer. Mr. Speaker, because the warmer weather is upon us again, the residents and users of this highway are starting to show their frustration and concerns towards myself and this government. I have residents with many years of experience of building roads, upgrading roads and maintaining roads, giving me suggestions on what should be done and when these upgrades and maintenance should be conducted. The section of the highway, the section in question is starting to get rough for the drivers again because it was not attended to in the fall 2024 and froze with potholes that is making driving hazardous and damage to their vehicles. Mr. Speaker, this government has to be more proactive to our concerns rather than reactive after the fact that something tragic has happened. This is not only for the infrastructure within the NWT, but to all the concerns that are brought to the attention of each department of this government. The safety and well-being of our citizens of the Northwest Territories is the utmost importance for me and hopefully this government. I will have questions for the Minister of Infrastructure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Mackenzie Delta. Member statements. Member from Inuvik Boot Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and happy Monday. Happy Monday to my colleagues. I look forward to another exciting week of budget review. Mr. Speaker, today I want to speak to building codes, or rather lack of building codes in the Northwest Territories, Mr. Speaker. All GNWT buildings, as I understand, do adopt or abide by the National Standards Building Code. That building codes include the electrical code, the plumbing code, the fire code, the energy code, as well, of course, as the building standards code, Mr. Speaker. However, all other developments, there is no code. And, Mr. Speaker, we're the only jurisdiction in Canada that without a building standards code. I've heard this in my riding. I'm sure others have as well, from both builders and contractors, prospective builders, electrical companies up there, as well as plumbing companies, Mr. Speaker. So today I'll be asking the question to the Minister of Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, as to when will the GNWT create our own building standards legislation with full analysis, risks and gaps, as well as funding for staffing, inspections and enforcement, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Thank you, member from Inuvik Boot Lake. Member statement. Member from Toonaday-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, last May in the early morning fire burned down one market rental duplex unit in the community of Fort Resolution. Thankfully, nobody was hurt and the flames were extinguished before the house were impacted. Housing NWT acted quickly to find new homes for the families who were affected by the fires, and soon 2 new units were brought into Fort Resolution to replace the homes that were destroyed. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, it was my understanding that the homes which Housing NWT brought into Fort Resolution to replace those units which had burned down were already bound for the community to expand their housing capacity. Community leaders understood that this is as well. Now, 1 year later after the fire, Fort Resolution is asking me when their new units will be provided to them. It's not enough to replace what was lost when they were promised new homes for families to move into. Fort Resolution, like many other of my communities of Toonaday and across the Northwest Territories, is suffering from a severe lack of housing. Many who have homes living in buildings that are aging severely, many more are living in crowded conditions that deserve better. We passed a motion last year declaring housing as a human right. Sustainability, accessibility, and affordability of housing is a top priority of this Assembly. Our Article 21 of UNDRIP, which the previous Assembly passed, states Indigenous people have the right, without discrimination, to improve their economic and social conditions, including housing. When I go back to my community, after this budget session, I want to bring them good news that Housing NWT is listening and prioritizing their needs and rights. I will have the questions for the Minister of Housing NWT at the appropriate time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Trinidad-Willett. Member statements. Colleagues, this past September, I traveled to Fort Smith for personal reasons when I ran into the Trades Awareness Coordinator and he informed me that their fall introductory program was taking place at Aurora College. As we discussed the program, he reminded me of the purpose of the program. It was to provide grade 9 to 12 students with an awareness to trade occupations through a 1-week hands-on experience at the college in trades such as carpentry, cooking, hairdressing, plumbing, electrical, mechanics, mining, welding, communications, and aviations. A couple of highlights of the conversation were there were a host of success stories where Northern students exposed to trades had gone on to pursue careers in the trades of their choice. The Trades Awareness Program provides opportunity for high school students to explore and experience the world of trades in a college setting while considering future opportunities for a viable career. After the conversation, he informed me that 2 young ladies from Litico Regional High School won top student awards in their respective trades. After hearing this, he told me that the closing ceremonies were happening the next day and asked if I'd be interested in attending. Next morning, I went to watch as the trades awareness instructor celebrated with 48 youth from the South Slave and Decho who completed the program and witnessed 7 students win top student certification and prizes. Before the award ceremony, I witnessed the Trades Olympics. It was amazing to see the students with the skills they learned, use the skills they learned while they were taught throughout the week. The winner of the competition was Connor Landry from Dega School from Port Providence. After the completion, we went to the Concord to hand out the awards. Much to my surprise, the 2 winners from the Hindi regions were Addie Erasmus, who was a top student in carpentry, and my granddaughter, Paige Isaiah Tanche, who was top student in the mine training equipment. As well, I would like to congratulate 2 participants from the Decho Riding Chief Sunrise School for winning their trades. Amy Norris was a top student in cooking, and Emily Norris was a top student in welding. These trade winners represented sometimes untapped potential that exists in our small communities. Congratulations to all the participants and for the college to offer this great opportunities for our youth. Thank you. Glenn. Member statements. Member statements. Returns to oral questions. Returns to oral questions. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Recognition of visitors in the gallery. Acknowledgement. Oh, recognitions of visitor gallery. Member from the Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to recognize Mark Height, providing services there and efficient means of programs and services to the Sawtooth through the Energy Alliance program. Mussy.
Recognition visitor gallery. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague beat me to the punch here, but I also wanted to just recognize Executive Director Mark Hike from the Arctic Energy Alliance. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North. Recognition visitor gallery. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I'll get in on the Mark Hike train as well. I'd like to recognize former Yellowknife Mayor and current Arctic Energy Alliance Executive Director Mark Hike. It's good to see you here today. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Range Lake. Recognition visitors in the gallery. Recognition visitor gallery. If we missed anyone in the gallery today, welcome to your chambers. I thank you very much for allowing us this honor to represent the people of Northwest Territories. I hope you are enjoying the proceedings. It's always nice to see people in the gallery. Recognition of visitors in gallery. Recognition of visitors in gallery. Acknowledgements. Acknowledgements. Oral questions. Oral questions. Member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to follow up with the Minister of Infrastructure. Last week, she issued a statement about the Connecting Families initiative, shared the exciting news that 1,870 households in the NWT are now eligible to receive internet services for $20 a month. Could the Minister just elaborate on this point? Which households will be eligible, Mr. Speaker? Thank you.
Frame Lake, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was very pleased to see the federal government finally extend this to the north. The eligibility is determined by the federal government by ISED, so we don't have a lot of ability to control that, but it does extend to families who receive the maximum amount of the child benefit. It also extends to seniors, Mr. Speaker, for seniors who are receiving the maximum amount of their guaranteed income supplement. So with that, Mr. Speaker, that is where we get to 1,870 families or households in the Northwest Territories. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure, member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the Minister. Mr. Speaker, how do residents find out if they're eligible? How are they going to find out how to apply for this program, or if they're eligible for it, and how they go about receiving this benefit? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Frame Lake, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in sort of an unusual approach, perhaps, the federal government they issue invitation letters. So anyone who is eligible does receive in the mail a letter from ISED, ISED, that's the Industry, Science, Economic Development. So people do need to be watching their mail for these letters. Those letters were going out over the fall and into December of last year. If someone thinks they are eligible, so if they fall into one of those categories, there is a process. It's on ISED's website about what to do if you lose your letter. And so, Mr. Speaker, I won't read all that out here, but perhaps what we'll do is make sure that we can share that on social media channels, and would certainly welcome people to share that information. So it's not, the matter's not closed if you've lost your letter or thrown it away, but there would be a process that folks would have to follow to get themselves back on the radar of this federal opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Infrastructure. Oral questions, final supplementary. Member from Oral questions. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have questions today for the Minister of Infrastructure. So the Arctic Energy Alliance has experienced major funding reductions in recent years and struggled to meet the huge demand from NWT residents, businesses, and community governments for its programs and services. And as of October of 2024, they had actually run out of money for their energy rebate programs and were no longer accepting applications. So given the reductions in federal money for energy efficiency rebate programs, has the GNWT considered stepping in with territorial money to support those programs, especially where this could directly save the GNWT money in subsidy payments? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North. Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we were quite disappointed to see the federal cuts to the low-carbon economy funding. That had a significant impact on the Department of Infrastructure and on our energy programs, and in particular with respect to the funding that's provided to Arctic Energy Alliance. So it was a significant impact on our budget. We don't have other or additional independent funds necessarily to come up with in areas where we could realign. Obviously, the department's budgets are under review right now, and certainly I would look forward to answering some questions in that regard, but there was not a new source of funding identified, so we don't, other than what is being presented in Maine's estimates that are before the committee, we don't have any new sources of funding from which to draw. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there's also been a huge demand to Arctic Energy Alliance for home energy evaluations to find efficiencies that could save homeowners money, but there's been a huge backlog, especially since COVID, due to a shortage of certified energy advisors. So what role could the GNWT play in helping to train or bring in more energy advisors to help address this backlog? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Yellowknife North. Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, Mr. Speaker, without being able to source some additional funding, it's difficult to come up at this point in time with a simple answer or a simple solution. We certainly do look forward to continuing to work closely with Arctic Energy Alliance. They're a critical partner in terms of delivering programs in this space. Mr. Speaker, I'd already actually spoken to the member with respect to setting up my own meeting to make sure that we can do what we can to work directly with Arctic Energy Alliance, identify where the shortcomings are, identify if there's particular communities that have specific needs, and then perhaps, firstly, we can certainly advocate more effectively when we are advocating together. And if there's an opportunity to work even within schools or within our own training programs for our staff, we'll certainly be open to doing that. But if it's an independent budget line item, again, Mr. Speaker, what's in our budget proposal right now is on the floor, and it is unfortunately a bit what it is with the significant drop in federal funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Infrastructure. Final supplementary, member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I mean, one area that the GNWT did manage to find funds in the last year was for Arctic Energy Alliance to work with homeowners in Norman Wells to look for energy efficiency opportunities. So I wonder if the minister could explain what successes or lessons learned have come from that initiative, which we were able to find funding for this past year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Yellowknife North, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do have a bit of information with respect to some of the work that was underway in Norman Wells. I don't know that we have a full evaluation done or an analysis done, which would certainly be helpful in order to determine what that might look like for others. But there was a program that was undertaken with Arctic Energy Alliance staff for a winterization walkthrough. It really is an opportunity to help particularly folks from lower medium income households understand some simple solutions. So examples in that regard would just be even insulating window plastic, which can have a fairly significant impact on heating costs. Weather stripping around doors similarly was something that came out of this, which again, they're simple solutions, Mr. Speaker, but sometimes those simple solutions don't cost very much. People just need to be educated. So again, happy to follow back up, see if there's other specific items that came after that initiative in Norman Wells, and we'll make sure to get that out so that others can benefit from that. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure. Oral questions. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I heard from a constituent today who had to wait 11 months for an ultrasound appointment. He tells me that it's a 9 to 10 month wait for a routine ultrasound. We've recently changed the appointment system here in Yellowknife. It was supposed to speed this up. We heard earlier reports that we're getting more people into appointments, not less. Why are we continuing to experience such a great backlog for people who are just trying to get routine appointments like this? We're not talking about major surgeries. We're talking about an ultrasound. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of Health will provide an answer.
Member from Range Lake. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is the first time that this has been brought to my attention, so I don't have any answers for the member at this time on wait times for ultrasound. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Minister of Health and Social Services. Member for Range Lake.
Mr. Speaker, as I said earlier, when these changes were made, the minister was able to provide some details on how many more people were being seen. It seemed like an improvement. Does she have any updated numbers for the House today? Thank you.
Member from Range Lake, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I don't have that level of detail for that specific area. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Member from Range Lake.
Mr. Speaker, I'm also being told that people are being told in the departments when they want to change appointments or if they need to change appointments with the doctors, they have to call the central booking mechanism, whether that be a phone call or an email or something like that. Why are we making it more cumbersome? Isn't there a way to do this more or less on the fly? Why are we adding extra steps for patients when they're trying to access health care? Should we not be making it simpler? Let people talk to their doctors, their health care providers, and change appointments as needed. Thank you.
Member from Range Lake, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, so if we're switching the line of questioning with how accessing the primary care clinic, there is a process that each clinic runs throughout the whole of the Northwest Territories. How it is in Yellowknife, the process of accessing the walk-in clinic or creating a same-day appointment downtown. If it's primary care clinic, you have to go through the primary care receptionist. If there's more detail or if there's a certain concern, I would gladly have the member bring that to my office and so we can figure out what the issue is. Thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member from the Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following up on my statement there, my first question to the Minister for Housing: can the Minister confirm the housing-related materials or the inventory destined for the Sahtu over the winter road season? Masi.
Thank you. Member from the Sahtu, Minister responsible for Housing and NWT.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The volume of material being shipped over the winter road. So Housing NWT's contractor anticipates approximately 6 dedicated loads for 2 new housing construction projects that Housing NWT has underway in the Sahtu communities. The first is the Toledo Seniors Duplex. This modular duplex is now on the winter road and headed to Toledo. The second project involves 2 hybrid modular duplexes for Delaney. The construction materials for this project are now in the community. The hybrid core components will be delivered via the winter road shortly. So no delays are anticipated at this time. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister responsible for Housing and NWT. Member from the Sahtu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the Minister. That's wonderful news here. It really provides comfort knowing that the end is in sight there for material delivery. My next question there, Mr. Speaker: can the Minister explain how many home repair projects are reserved for the Sahtu and if the materials are going to be shipped on this winter road season? Masi.
From the Sahtu, Minister responsible for Housing and NWT.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for the question. In terms of home repair projects for the Sahtu, I don't have those exact numbers on hand, but I can provide that information to the member. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister responsible for Housing and NWT. Final supplementary, member from the Sahtu.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is more of a comment. I was going to say I look forward to working with the Minister on getting the information so that we can relay that information on mobilization of materials to the Sahtu leadership. So I will be working with the Minister over the coming days. Masi.
Colleagues, it's oral questions, not opportunity to do member statements or follow up. Please follow the process. Thank you very much. Oral questions. Member from Inuvik-Boot Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following up on my member statement earlier on the Building Standards Code, can the Minister provide if indeed the Department has begun to work on having our very own Building Standards Codes for the Northwest Territories? Thank you.
Member from Inuvik-Boot Lake, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is an area of quite a lot of interest to me as well, and I was very pleased that the department was willing to undertake this area when the beginning of this government. It is not only the Department of Infrastructure, Mr. Speaker, it involves municipal and community affairs, housing, as well as infrastructure. I can say that we certainly have come together as multiple departments. There is a working group in place, and what the next step is to really put in place some recommendations of what it will look like to bring all the different pieces together to have a consolidated framework from the National Building Code, and one that can be made in the North and applied for the North and relevant to the North. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure, member from Inuvik-Boot Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for that. That is excellent news. Can the Minister tell me in the meantime, I guess, any guidance that is offered if you do have a developer, certainly in one of the regions that are reaching out looking for that kind of information, is there anything currently set up in place that can offer some guidance to contractors or even individuals looking to build? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Inuvik-Boot Lake, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Certainly don't want people to think there's not something in place. As of April of 2021, the Good Building Practice for Northern Facilities 4th edition was released by the department. Certainly would expect and consider it appropriate for all private developers and other levels of government, and really any other non-GNWT bodies to be using this as their reference place. It does in it describe and explain what the model codes are and give some guidance as to what we have found to be appropriate and workable for northern infrastructure. So certainly do want to point people to that document while we are working to have our very own set of codes in place. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure. Final supplementary, member from Inuvik-Boot Lake.
Thank you, and that's good news. We have something, certainly not something enforceable, like I know we will have once as the Minister is committed to, we do get our own set of building standards codes. Can the Minister commit to internally what kind of timelines they're looking at to hopefully have this completed? Is this something we can expect to have by the end of this this legislature, or what would our timelines be on that? Thank you.
From Lake, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, how about if I commit to having a plan for a plan? I don't have a final date at this moment in time, but I certainly have asked that we, as a 20th Assembly, walk out of here with that in place. So that certainly is my goal at this time. Our next step is for the working group to put forward their recommendations of what it will look like, and with that, I expect we'll have a more firm timeline. But again, it's certainly my hope for this at this moment that we are walking out of the 20th Assembly with this in place. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure. All questions. Member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Further to my member's statement, I'd like to direct my questions to the Minister of Infrastructure. With the warmer weather upon us and the conditions of the Dempster Highway worsening, I applaud the Minister on her infrastructure improvements project. But there was no mention of Highway number 8 in the upgrades or regular maintenance. What is the department doing at the present time to ensure the safety of the users of the Dempster Highway between Wrangling River and Inuvik? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Mackenzie Delta, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we do maintain a watch on all our highways, and members of the public can access that through the Drive NWT website. It is now being kept up to date almost immediately and instantly, so certainly do want to point people to that as a resource. With respect to Highway 8, I have my latest update for the highway in its entirety is that it was in a fair state. We do have a grader out doing some ice blading from Sigachuk to Wrangling River. And again, Mr. Speaker, certainly do appreciate getting updates from folks who are driving. Again, in addition to the Drive NWT website, it is always helpful to hear from folks directly. But again, right now, the latest is that it's in fair conditions, and again, a grader out for part of it. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure. Member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With the tanker in question that went off the highway at the section around Wrangling River, there's signage on both sides of the river asking vehicles to slow down, and the signage is about 50 meters from the area where it's pretty bad, and the bigger trucks require more time to slow down. But these signage are too close to the area. Will the Minister advise the regional department to make changes where these signages are further away from that section and give the bigger trucks more time to slow down? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mackenzie Delta, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's the first specific comment I've received on signage placement. I'm very happy to take that away. I'm familiar with this particular incident of this tanker. I've heard some other reasons as to what the potential cause of that might have been, but I'm also fairly aware that there's likely to be some investigation of the matter. So just want to temper that it may not have been speed and may not have been conditions. But absolutely, with signage, I will certainly take that away, and let's work with those who are on that stretch of highway and the region to determine the best possible places for signage. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure. Final supplementary. Member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is the regional department working with the Minister's department on daily inspections of the highway from the NWT border to Tuktoyaktuk to give updates on where work might be required for safety reasons? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we do conduct daily inspections on the highway network. You know exactly where staff might be on any one given day. I don't want to be overcommitting. I would acknowledge that we don't necessarily have enough staff to be on every stretch of highway all the way from the border throughout the Beaufort Delta region, but there are staff out on those highways on a regular basis. So I believe I have suggested before we can try to keep members better up to date in terms of where we're trying to be, and I'll try to see if we can get a specific schedule to the extent that we have one, and at least share it with members, if not publicly. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Infrastructure. Oral questions. Member from Trinity-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, prior to the fire in May 2024, Housing NWT made a commitment to provide 2 duplexes for the community for resolution. But after the fire, these units were used to replace the 2 units that burnt. My question to the Minister of Housing NWT is that when can the community expect the 2 new duplexes to arrive into the community? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Trinity-Willity. Minister responsible for Housing NWT.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The information I have from Housing NWT is over the past 2 years, Housing NWT has completed 8 incremental and 2 replacement public housing units in Fort Resolution, including a 4-plex for singles, a duplex for singles, a duplex for seniors, and a public housing replacement duplex. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister responsible for Housing NWT. Member from Trinity-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when we had that fire in Fort Resolution, we lost 2 duplexes, one being a public housing unit and the other is being a market rental unit. And one unit burned down both units in that community. But we already replaced that unit with the 2 units that were ready to come in the fall. So my question to the minister is, now that we anticipating 2 duplexes coming to the community, I want to know where they're going to put them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Trinity-Willity. Minister responsible for Housing NWT.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In terms of the numbers that I provided, there are no plans at this time to replace the market housing duplex, and the public housing duplex has been replaced with the recently completed replacement duplex. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Responsible for Housing NWT. Final supplementary. Member from Trinity-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm a little confused because I'm just assuming that the NWT Housing Corporation has insurance in the event of a fire, and the duplex that caught fire, I would just say that it's my understanding that the duplex should be replaced. But what happened now is that what I'm hearing is that that duplex has been replaced with a project from previous year onto that site. So what I'm hearing from the minister is that it sounds like we're not getting no duplex. Thank you.
For the Minister?
My question, Mr. Speaker, is that I just basically said that, so what the minister is saying is that we're not getting no duplex. I'd like her to confirm that, yes or no. Thank you.
Trinity-Willity. Minister responsible for Housing NWT.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure of Housing NWT's insurance obligations, especially with the fire related to the duplex in Fort Resolution. I can check into the information for the member and follow up. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister responsible for Housing NWT. Oral questions. Oral questions. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have further questions for the Minister of Infrastructure. First, is there anything in the government's business plan that specifically speaks to energy efficiency goals or strategies in terms of buildings, appliances, or vehicles? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Yellowknife North, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is. We do, of course, have commitments to advance the energy strategy and to update that. And the energy strategy is really the all-encompassing approach that we utilize to determine how a government as a whole is going to be approaching energy issues, energy efficiency included. The Department of Infrastructure is certainly the lead on that, but we're not alone. Mr. Speaker, Housing NWT also has commitments in their business plan, I understand, with respect to incorporating energy efficiency technologies. And Department of Infrastructure, again, as I had just mentioned, we have within us the responsibility under EV technologies and also supports to Arctic Energy Alliance, which delivers a lot of programs. So in short, the short answer is yes, Mr. Speaker.
Minister for Infrastructure. Member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do understand that the business plan speaks to the energy strategy, and there are things contained within the energy strategy. One of those is a goal, at least in the previous iteration of the 2030 energy strategy, a goal to increase commercial, residential, and institutional building energy efficiency by 15%. But can the minister explain what practical steps the government is taking to actually achieve that goal? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Yellowknife North, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there's a number of initiatives that are underway by the government. We have, if I'm not mistaken, in the last 5 years spent over $60 million in different energy efficiency programs, including renewable heat, renewable energy, and, for example, biomass boiler installation, LED lighting replacements in a number of areas. There's a push towards some solar energy and being able to interconnect those systems into our existing energy infrastructure. So again, and supporting communities in their efforts to move towards having, again, their own opportunities for district heating, for example, again, boiler installations, and also other energy alternatives that can then feed into our grid and support the grid. So quite a number of things happening in the space, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Minister of Infrastructure. Final supplementary, member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can the minister point to evidence that the work underway will actually lead us to achieve the goal of 15% energy efficiency reductions? Is that a path that is laid out and quantified, or we're just hoping that the investment will get us to the 15% goal? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Yellowknife North, Minister of Infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there are annual reporting requirements from both myself with respect to the energy side, but also from my colleague at ECC with respect to our climate change framework. Mr. Speaker, I don't have them at the tip of my fingers here today, but we do certainly see it as an obligation to report on the progress we're making in those two areas, and that is tabled here in the House annually. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister of Infrastructure. Oral questions. Member from Toonaday-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in my community for resolution, we had a couple of incidents just over the weekend in public housing units where it's all drug-related, and we had a tenant that was is afraid to go home now because of the drug dealers coming to their home and using weapons, etc. They got nowhere to go, and we had another incident as well where a cocktail was thrown to the house and caught fire. My question to the Minister of Housing and WT is that Housing and WT, what are they doing to address the drug dealers in public housing units? Can the Minister provide an update on the House on the progress they're making to address this issue? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member from Toonaday-Willity, Minister responsible for Housing and WT.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I could understand the concerns coming from the member about illegal activities in public housing units, because this is happening across the territory, and this is something we're all facing in our constituencies and in our ridings. So what's happening in Fort Resolution is happening throughout, and I just want to emphasize the need that we need to work together. We need to work with the RCMP. We need to work with the communities. We need to report illegal activities, and there's an actual app that's available online that people can download. It's called P3 Tips. If you don't want to report, with Crime Stoppers, you can report with this app, and it'd be anonymous. So that's important for people to know. In terms of Fort Resolution and their concerns, LHOs, one thing they must do is they must be able to prove the illegal activity to the rental officer to obtain an eviction order. So proving the activity can be a challenge. LHOs often rely on a submission of evidence from others who may be too frightened to come forward. So that's why I was talking about this app that might be able to provide this evidence. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister responsible for Housing and WT. Member from Toonaday-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm glad to hear that the wish to work together is key, and I agree on that issue. I just want to know if the Minister could work with the local leadership and the RCMP and myself, and after the session's done, so we can start looking on a way to deal with these issues, because these issues are very serious, and we got to make public housing safer for our tenants and also for the community. I just want to see if I can get a commitment from the minister on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Member from Trinidad-Willity, Minister responsible for housing and NWT.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And safe for staff, because staff are going into these housing units and having to upkeep and maintain these units, and sometimes they can't even get into the unit. So illegal activities, they're barricading the doors, and it's difficult for staff. But with the RCMP and the rental office have met with Housing NWT, and they meet with the program advisors, they meet with the LHOs, they have training with the LHOs. The RCMP regularly meet with Housing NWT officials to ensure information is shared and how improvements can be made. So the RCMP also encouraged local detachments to assist LHOs by sharing whatever information is available that they could legally provide and that won't disrupt an investigation. So these are some of the ideas that are talked with districts, with LHOs, with RCMP, and with community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister responsible for housing and NWT. Final supplementary. Member from Trinidad-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really appreciate those comments, and I just want to know if I'm able to get a commitment from the minister to work with local leadership and the RCMP and the rental officer. Maybe perhaps we could have a public meeting in the community within sometime in March or April, and start looking at ways as to how we could address this issue and work together on this issue. So I'd like to get a commitment from the minister on this. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister responsible for housing and NWT.
Speaker, I'm always happy to have discussions with communities for safer communities and dispelling like illegal activities in communities. So happy to have further discussions about that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister responsible for housing and NWT. Oral questions. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I recently learned that as the Minister of Health and Social Services' responsibility to regulate veterinarians in the Northwest Territories through the Veterinarian Medical Act, one of the issues that's come up recently with a closure of a clinic here in Yellowknife is vet records do not move with the vet if they open their own clinic. This is a concern for patients. They want to ensure that their pet care continues to follow their vet. Can the minister let us know how she can help make that possible? Because currently our act does not allow for that, whereas other jurisdictions, they have acts that permit the transfer of records without the need for a court order or voluntary disclosure. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Range Lake, Minister responsible for Health and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, as the member has stated, the Veterinary Profession Act does fall under one of the under my portfolio. However, it does not speak to records. It doesn't speak, and so what happens usually, individuals in southern jurisdictions, for the owner of a veterinary clinic to be practicing the veterinary, and they usually are the ones that have control over all the records. So in the circumstances that the member, unfortunately we've all seen in the news and everything with the Great Slave clinic shutting down, there is some uncertainty of what's going on, but our legislation at this time doesn't speak to any veterinarian records, and those would be the property of the owner, my understanding. So at this time, we are not looking at the legislation for this, as we have many pieces of legislation that we are working on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
From Minister responsible for Minister of Health and Social Services, member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the somewhat, not absurd, but unfamiliar territory we're in, because this is veterinary medicine. But our act is 6 pages long. It's 12 clauses long. It hasn't been looked at since, I think, beyond minor changes, 1988. Is this something the minister can put on the legislative agenda for the future? Thank you.
From Range Lake, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think a lot of our legislation is old, and, as we prioritize getting through some of the legislation that we have, I will make sure that this is added to the list and to triage it as we do all the other legislation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Health and Social Service. Final supplementary. Member from Rangeley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate that. Is there any kind of plan to expand veterinary medicine in the Northwest Territories? Currently, we only have 4 vets, I believe, working, and only 2 doing small animal medicine. Does the department have any programs or supports available that would ease in the recruitment and retention of veterinarians in the Northwest Territories? Thank you.
Member from Rangeley, Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, currently the Northwest Territories has 35 registered veterinarians. Sorry about that, Mr. Speaker. Registered veterinarians, which include those who visit the Northwest Territories to provide locum service when needed. I know that of 33 communities, our smaller communities are overrun. I hear from my colleague next to me in her communities, the dogs are, and so these services that are coming into our region are not just for our sick dogs, but our dogs that are here that need just basic vaccines, neutering and spaying. We have a lot of partners in the capital that have been doing huge work for this region, and I know in Nunavik we have some dedicated veterinarians that keep coming back and returning. And yes, there probably could be some more work around this. However, right now, unfortunately, the work that we have under the work that I have under my portfolio, this is not, unfortunately, at the top of my list. But I will make sure that we take a look at it. We have it on the list as to what can be updated. If there's something easy that we can take from our neighbors to look at our legislation to review if that can meet the needs of the territory, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member from Trinidad-Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In collaboration, I just want to ask my question to the Deputy Premier. You heard my statement a little bit earlier today in regards to the issues in full resolution. I wanted to invite the Premier, perhaps in April, to a community meeting in full resolution with the Housing Minister, RCMP, etc. So I just want to see if we could get a commitment to plan a meeting together, probably in April sometime. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay, member from Trinidad-Willity. The Deputy Premier cannot make a commitment for the Premier. So if you're asking for the Deputy Premier to come and have that meeting, then she can answer the question. Member from Trinidad-Willity.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Either the Premier or Deputy Premier, but in this case, Deputy Premier. Thank you.
From Trinidad-Willity. Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I had a very lovely visit in Fort Resolution last year when I was there. And I can't make commitments, obviously, for the Premier or his schedule. I know I've already got a visit myself planned in April, but certainly happy to see Fort Resolution is not that hard for us to get to. If we can work together and find a date in April, I'm happy to try. And if I can't, it may well be that the Premier is able to. But again, so let's try and see if we can make some dates work. I know the Housing Minister is nodding as I'm speaking, so at the very least, I expect she may be planning something. So look, happy to try, Mr. Speaker. I don't have my calendar in front of me, so I'm just hesitating to commit before I know whether it's even within the realm of possibility. But as I said, happy to go back. It was a lovely visit last time I was there. Thank you.
Madam Deputy Premier. Minister from Trinidad-Willity.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd just like to maybe also invite the Minister for Sorry, no, I just
Deputy Premier you were talking to, so do you want to?
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Member from Trinidad-Willity. Oh. You want to be put back on? Okay, I will put you back on. Thank you. I'll put you back on. Oral questions. Member from Nunavut Boot Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, previous member statements, myself as well as other colleagues, have expressed concerns about cabin leases. Specifically for me, Mr. Speaker, cabin leases on Crown lands in the Nunavut settlement region. It's my understanding that in the Nunavut final agreements, if permits are required on town lands, they will be provided at no cost. Can the Minister of ECC please give us an update on what's happened with those? I understand, Mr. Speaker, that people are still being invoiced for those cabins. Thank you.
Member from Nunavut Lake, Minister for Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the department has made significant efforts in this area across all of the NWT. We've reached out to all of the Indigenous governments and are currently working on a collaborative process to address the leasing of public land, and we also have a process where existing owners or leasees can apply through the department to have their current lease fees paused as we work through this process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank the Minister. So can the Minister confirm then if invoices are still being charged? I understand there is an opportunity to request to have them paused. Certainly not everybody. Certainly traditional people that have harvesting cabins out there may not have the ability or the technology to actually require that to apply for that request. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Can the Minister confirm that invoicing is still being charged to members in the Nunavut settlement region that have cabins on Crown lands? Thank you.
Member from Nunavut Lake, Minister, Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, if the individuals in question have not gone and completed the application to pause that process, then they could still be receiving invoices. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, Environment and Climate Change. Final supplementary. Member from Nunavut Lake.
It's disappointing, Mr. Speaker. We had hoped, given that this has been ongoing for quite some time, that we had understood that all invoicing would be paused until such time as this work can be completed. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, can the Minister commit to when they're going to finally get this issue put to rest? A timeline on when we can see this proposed changes put into place. Thank you.
Nunavut Lake, Minister, Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sort of a two-part question, but happy to answer both of them. So when it comes to the specific of no longer invoicing, this is a voluntary program that we've put in place to address those concerns, and it does not relieve the land user of the responsibility of the payment. This is not a forgiveness policy, but a temporary pause of payment. So there may be some lessees or leasers that don't want to pause the payment the way it's going currently. So that's the first part. On the second part, Mr. Speaker, we have sent out invitations to all of the Indigenous governments to come back to the department. We have engagement sessions booked for the spring and summer, one in the Beaufort Delta, I believe, and one in Hay River, to start these conversations. And we're certainly, happy to hear from all of the Indigenous governments. It's not a process that we as the GNWT or as the department was putting forward our expectations, but really are anxious to hear what the Indigenous government's positions are and how we can work together to find a solution. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, Environment and Climate Change. Oral questions. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to try again with the Minister of Health and Social Services. How have the changes to Yellowknife primary care reduced wait times for appointments in the capital? Thank you.
Thank you, Member from Range Lake. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am unsure of right now what those wait times are. That's not something that I have here with me in the House. So if the member, wants to bring this questioning up up again another day, then I would be more than willing to try and get those answers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister Health and Social Services. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sometimes we get questions on the fly and we need to ask them. These are important things. Another question: that how are these changes? How many appointments have increased since, like, the number of appointments available to patients increased since these changes have done? Are we seeing more people since the changes have been done? Thank you.
Minister of Health and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, right now I'm not sure if he's just speaking directly to the primary clinic that's going on here in Yellowknife, or it's the primary care clinic pilot that's going on Fort Smith. If it's just in Yellowknife, I'll have to get back to the member on the stats of the primary care since it opened not even a year ago. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Final supplementary. Member from Range Lake.
Thank you. Yes, Yellowknife is, of course, my primary concern because that's where I represent, but the minister that has the numbers territory-wide or by community, I take those as well. Thank you.
Was that a question, member from Range Lake?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the minister provide the stats from the entire territory broken down by community at a future date? Thank you.
From Range Lake. Minister of Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as we are rolling out primary care reform, and we only are piloting it in certain regional centres, but those ones that we are, I will see if they have the stats available, as this is within this last year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister of Health and Social Services. Oral questions. Member from Tuna Day Willity.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Minister, Deputy Premier. Earlier, I'm trying to figure a way how we could work together and combat the issue of the drug problems in our small communities, in particular for resolution. And I would like to ask the question to the Deputy Premier if we could work together and look at sending out invitations to the head of the RCMP&G division here in the Northwest Territories to come to our meeting, and also the Dene Nation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, member from Tuna Day Willity. I'm going to turn it to you, Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've fortunately heard the Premier speak about this many times, so I feel like I'm in fairly comfortable ground in referencing the work that's happening already in terms of the SCAN legislation and a suite of other legislative initiatives that are under the Department of Justice, which is also under the Premier. And Mr. Speaker, I know that the community policing priorities are an area that both the Premier takes very seriously, and I've also heard the Commander take very seriously as being an area where he wants to see real movement. So whether it's who exactly might initiate an invitation and to where that, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest we want to perhaps I'll take a pause on that particular response and confirm and at least commit that I'll follow up personally with the Premier on that. Again, I know it's an area of serious concern for his community, so making sure that communities are properly engaged with the RCMP at the proper level to see that their community priorities are being followed through. I'm confident that we'll find a path forward. Just exactly how that might play out, I think I would leave to the Premier or to the Minister of Justice to speak to. But I'll speak to him directly about it. Again, I know it's an area of concern for him as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Premier. Oral questions. Member from Tuna Day Willity. Oral questions. Oral questions. Written questions. Mr. Clerk. Oh, no, returns to written questions. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have a return to written question 13-20(1), asked by the member for Range Lake on February 10th, 2025, regarding physician staffing. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Clerk. Got to go back to written questions. Written questions. Written question. Returns to written questions. Return to written questions. Replies to Commissioner's address. Replies to Commissioner's address. Petitions. Petitions. Reports on committee on the review of bills. Reports on committee on the review of bills. Reports on standing special committees. Reports on standing special committees. Tabling of documents. Tabling of documents. Notice of motions. Notice of motions. 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 Notice of motions for first reading of bills. Notice of motions, first reading of bills. First reading of bills. First reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Second reading of bills. Consideration of, in committee of the whole and of the whole of bills and other matters. Table document 275-20 brackets 1 with the member from Toonaday-Willity in the chair.
I now call the Committee of the Whole to order. What is the wish? I want to go to the member, what is the wish of the committee? I want to go to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the committee would like to consider table document 275-20 brackets 1, 2025-2026 main estimates, Department of Infrastructure. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Committee, do you agree? Thank you. We'll take a short break. Committee, we have agreed to consider table documents 275-20 brackets 1, 2025-2026 main estimates. We will not consider the Department of Infrastructure. Does the Minister of Infrastructure wish to bring witnesses into the House?
Yes, please, Mr. Chair.
Does the committee agree? Thank you. Sergeant Arms, please escort the witnesses into the chambers. Okay, thank you. Would the Minister please introduce her witnesses?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On my left, Steve Luda, Deputy Minister of Infrastructure, and on my right, Amy Burt, the Director of Corporate Services.
Okay, thank you, committee. The committee has agreed to forego general comments. Does the committee agree to proceed to the detail contained in the table documents? Committee? Agreed, thank you. Committee will defer the departmental summary and review of the estimates by activity summary, beginning with asset management, starting on page 267, with information items on page 270. Are there any questions? Seeing no further questions, please turn to page 268. The member from Great Slade, did he have a question?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was just trying to catch up to your page numbers. It took me a moment. I do have a question for the Minister, but I'm not certain if this is the right area. No, it's not. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Please, as there are no further questions, please turn to page 268, Infrastructure Assets Management Operations Expenditure Summary 2025-2026 Main Estimates, $18,744,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to Corporate Management, beginning on page 271, with information items on page 273. Are there any questions? No further questions. Please turn to page 272, Infrastructure Corporate Management Operational Expenditure Summary, 2025-2026 Main Estimates, $8,695,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to Energy and Strategic Initiatives, beginning on page 274, with information items on page 279. Are there any questions? We'll go to the member from Great Slate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I apologize if this is the incorrect section. Mr. Chair, you are going quite quickly. But in the department's business plan on page 7 of their business plan update, there is a discussion of establishing a continuous improvement committee. Can the minister please expand on what that committee is continuously improving? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am also quite excited about this. It is very much an internal committee, though, so I'm going to turn that over to the Deputy Minister, please.
Thank you. I'm going to the Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm excited about this one as well. It's a committee that we're looking at all of our processes and determining which ones we can make efficiencies on. One of them was the reorganization of the Department of Infrastructure when we amalgamated with Public Works and Services and Transportation. There were certainly some opportunities to improve our workflows through that. Using some value stream analysis, we were able to look at those processes and look at how the organizational organization is set up for success, and we're making small changes, but it is one that's taking a fair bit of time. People are doing it off the corner of their desks, but it is one that we are making incremental changes and efficiencies on a regular basis. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I go to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I consider myself a pretty big nerd, and I don't really understand what that meant. So maybe if I could get the minister to explain it a little bit further in plain English. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm happy to turn to the deputy one more time. I know we do have a bit of detail here that we can provide. Let me start there, and perhaps we'll also bring Amy into the question. Amy Burt into the answer before we're done. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll go to the deputy minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this value stream analysis is just basically how work and information flows through our department, how it comes in as a notional plan. It comes into the notional plan. We go for funding for it. We do the engineering, we do all the planning work, all the permitting and everything. And without that, there are times where that work plan will sort of zigzag and go back and forth on some of the processes, where it should be a steady line where each phase of the process is advancing forward and not going back to a different department. So it's more taking it from, it starts with environment, it starts with finance, then it goes to environment, then it goes to the engineering, and then it turns to the project management. So looking at those type of efficiencies on a project front, it's just streamlining and making it easier for the process to flow through and to know where we are, where the choke points are on those processes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So would it not be something that could be addressed with regular project management processes like Gantt charts? But is there just way too many moving pieces? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, so some work that we do certainly does already include using things like a Gantt chart or other strategic tool. This was really meant to be one that would look, again, at that process from a different lens. So, you can say, for example, if you use that lens and you identify a process that's not efficient, this is the committee that would be then led or tasked with fixing the problem. So, even a small example would be using e-approve for approving monthly variance reports that come through. And obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but the Department of Infrastructure does have a lot of variances on, because there's such a large number of projects that are being monitored on any given time. So, helps to coordinate that process as a whole. So it really, much like having the red tape production working group over in the Department of Finance, you could say, doesn't that just naturally happen? And the reality is, when folks are doing their day-to-day work and keeping the lights on, that doesn't necessarily lead to taking the time to evaluate whether or not what we're doing is the best way of doing it. This is meant to be a focused effort to do that. It's in the business plan, so it's a focused effort to do that. It's a publicly reported target as part of that business plan, that really we want to say this is an area that we know that we have some room, that we could do some work on, and this is that initiative. I hope that's a bit more helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And when the minister said e-approve, my whole body shuddered. Not a fan, but I understand why it does help projects move along more smoothly in theory. Changing line of question, I was hoping that the minister could get into what budgetary implications, can be expected from the department's commitment to get to net zero by 2050. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I expect there may be some. I can't necessarily say with certainty at this moment, and the reason being that the energy strategy update is still being drafted. It is an item that I believe we will have something forward for within this fiscal year. And once we have the new updated strategy that outlines a bit more, that certainly puts us in a better position to be specific as to what areas of net zero will require funding. I mean, there's certainly, with respect to any significant energy infrastructure changes, whether it's the Tolston expansion, if that is an area that we move forward on, whether it's micro hydro projects in small communities, all of those will advance us to a net zero. Which one advances under which timeline, certainly that changes, but all of those items come with significant dollar values. So all of those, of course, are capital projects, Mr. Chair. Those are going to be the big ticket items. But yeah, that's at this point in time, again, what I can commit to is making sure we get that new updated energy strategy out, as that will really outline ultimately where the budget will be needed. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that answer. So keeping that in mind then, that you're expecting to see more through the renewed energy strategy, will there be a lens placed on some of these projects, the larger capital projects the Minister mentioned, that will provide information to both members and the public around the sort of estimated spends that will help us get to net zero? Will that be part of the information presented? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we already do provide certainly some information with respect to for the amount of change or expected change that you would see in the capital planning process. The macroeconomic policy that we are looking to bring forward and to apply a lens to will also include consideration, since there's obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, there's always open questions, but not having access to energy efficiency does indeed create risk of increased cost over time. So that would be part of that lens, and that is something that is coming through and will be part of the substantiation that we see for capital projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the member from Great Slave.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And with the time I have left, I guess I'll try and be a little bit more specific. Could committee anticipate to see an estimated dollar amount attached to large capital projects in terms of how much of that spend would go towards net zero reductions? Obviously, I realize that might be very intangible in terms of, say, something like Dalston, but it could be something really tangible, like increasing the spend through Arctic Energy Alliance on getting wood stoves into more small communities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there certainly is a cost-benefit analysis that does form part of the business case for any large project, and that would want to take into consideration O&M costs, which in turn would reflect higher costs depending upon the source of energy or the volatility of the energy source. Mr. Chair, the short answer is I would think the answer is going to be yes, but maybe not on every single item or every single smaller project, but on larger projects it will be. Where I think the rub of the question though is on whether or not the information that we're doing or the analysis is doing is meeting the request of the member. I've certainly heard different versions of this, so perhaps I can commit to sit down and just make sure that what we are bringing forward in our capital plan does meet the needs and the requests, and certainly if not, I'm only going to face more questions, so it's in my interest to have that resolved early. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on my list I have is the member from Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, I'm kind of looking at the top of the list there for contributions, advancing hydro, public engagement, but then has no more money here, and then looking down, energy corporation lease agreements, energy, NWT energy efficiency projects. Is one of these, or maybe throughout the other pages, is there a program that is undergoing discussions and possible funding for the Delaney Hydro project? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, none of these are broad funding agreements, and some of them, well, obviously some that are already have sunsetted with they're in the 2023-24 line or 24-25, but for other areas they are other grants and contributions. There's none that are necessarily specific to the Delaney micro project. Now, that said, I know I have had outreach from Equité Gaudette in Roundup on this. We're certainly keen to examine and explore the possibility of microhydro. I'm certainly very keen on it. So some of that is work that can be done within our department by the folks who are, by the proposed budget in front of you, to continue to staff having a strategic energy division that will help allow for the staff who have the expertise to do exactly this kind of investigation. So while it doesn't have a specific line item, again, I'm quite confident that at least at this stage we can work with the Delaney-Gauthier government to move this along. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the Minister for that reply. The Minister had mentioned that some of the funding sources have sunsetted it. Now, I'm more specifically looking down at the Low Carbon Economy Leadership Fund, and you got 3 sources there for a total of 10.3 million. And the Minister had mentioned earlier in the day about ongoing negotiations there for the Arctic Energy Alliance funding. Is that related to the numbers that we're seeing? Is that what is being lobbied by this government to reinstate those 3 line items for a total of 10.3 million? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have certainly raised this both with Ministers Gibault and Minister Wilkinson. It is quite frustrating, as I understand that the federal government reallocated the money that previously was under this fund to areas that were not beneficial to the Northwest Territories, certainly not in equal amounts. For example, with respect to diverting it to heat pump initiatives that, while we're certainly continuing to investigate the ability and the applicability of heat pumps to the Northwest Territories, there are regions for which the current technology is not compatible. So, as I say, I've certainly voiced that on more than one occasion, my frustration, and we're not alone in voicing that frustration, but to date I have not received any positive response from the federal government that they would re-examine this fund specifically. I think they were looking at changing some of the accessibility or eligibility on some of the other funds so that we can apply. But this stream of funding, in particular, these 3 streams under the LCELF, have not been reinstated by the federal government. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go to the member from the Sawtooth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to the Minister for that update there, and I look forward to a favorable reply later on in the year, and wish the Minister the best of the lobbying efforts to reinstate those funds in MSC.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member now from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I just wanted to first ask a question about the member for Yellowknife North touched upon it today in her member statement, and I wanted to follow up during budget here. Certainly, it was unfortunate to see the discontinuation of the Low Carbon Economy Leadership Fund. I just note that there's a few projects that have discontinued funding also under the Energy Action Plan. And I was just wondering, I see the electric bicycles rebate and the electric vehicles rebate, and I'm just wondering, is there a reason why the money that was saved from these programs wasn't redirected to different programs in the Energy Action Plan, particularly the low-income program to address energy poverty? I know during budget last year we talked about the importance of that program and how it would be nice to see that program expanded. Can the Minister speak to that and why the savings that we've achieved from removing older programs, or other programs, is not being used to move towards other programs in the Energy Action Plan? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm going to send that one to Ms. Burke, please.
Thank you. I'll go to the Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Energy Action Plan funds sunsetted in 23-24. So the contributions that you're seeing afterwards, and that would be for community energy planning, the fast charger corridor, and then the low-income program, those were all kind of submitted supplemental. So in order to kind of reinstate the funding for those ones that were no longer continued, we'd have to go forward with a new submission. But the reason why the other ones were reduced was just as a result of sunsetting funds. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go back to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, maybe the minister or staff could give us an update on progress that they've been making in advocating the federal government for kind of continuation of these funds, or perhaps obtaining new funds. I noticed that, when we look at the revenue items on page 262, there's a number of different projects for which we got new funding this year or increased funding. I won't list them off, but I do see a number there. So I'm just wondering why we haven't made progress on getting funding for programs like this. Certainly, the low-income program in particular, to address energy poverty, I would love to see us get funding for, or move funding around to make it possible to continue funding this program, because I do see it as critical. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the low-income program to address energy poverty, that does continue to have the same $200,000 amount that was in place since 23-24. That has not changed. The other programs, to the extent that there were federal funds available, I mean, Mr. Chair, I can only say, as I said to the other member, I was surprised, given what seemed to be the current federal government's interest in this space, that this received such a drastic reallocation of funding. I say reallocation because as I understand it, the money that went to the Low Carbon Economy Leadership Fund was directed to other areas, one being, in particular, again, as I said, the heating pumps, but there was a secondary one, which again was around different fuel sources, and again, nothing that was necessarily applicable to the Northwest Territories or as directly applicable as this particular funding was. I don't know. It really does not strike me as intuitive as to why those changes were made. We have raised it. I suspect, given the state of affairs in shift, we're likely to be in shift shortly with our federal colleagues, that this is an area that we will have to re-examine once we know what the next government's iteration of priorities might be in Ottawa. But other than that, unfortunately, that's about as much as I can provide for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to emphasize to the minister that, some of these programs, even some more than others, particularly the low-income program, but there was a number of programs put forward under the Low Carbon Economy Leadership Fund that were about more than just reducing greenhouse gases, which of course is an important goal, but also these are some of the key programs that have been used in the territory to help people reduce their cost of living, it's something that politicians constantly talk about, and it's one of the areas that we have the least ability to affect things, except for this area, helping people reduce their heating costs, helping people reduce the cost of operating their homes. So I personally think programs like this that are geared towards those goals really are important and need territorial funding, even if we don't have the funding coming from Canada, though I strongly encourage the minister to come to go to Ottawa and demand funding for things like that. But areas where we're able to, these programs have been, in every case, oversubscribed. A lot of people are interested in getting this kind of funding. A lot of people are interested in doing upgrades to their homes, which will help them, reduce their carbon output and help them save money. So I just really want to make the case for that, and would encourage the minister to fund programs accordingly, and just understand that, we put a lot of money into big infrastructure projects in this department, and I'm not denying that those are important, but a little bit of money to each individual homeowner goes a long way to helping them reduce the costs of their pocketbooks, and that's the thing that people feel when you make changes for them. People aren't going to notice their costs go down, because we put a bunch of money towards this or that infrastructure project. So I do just want to make that case to the minister. She can reply if she wants, but it's something that I think is an important area. I think it's important to residents. The fact that these programs have been oversubscribed year over year over year tells us that this is something that is important to residents. So any case I can make for continuing the programs, I will make it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, it's not a lack of understanding or frankly even disagreement. As I said, I was surprised, surprised probably doesn't quite describe it, but certainly was surprised to learn that the federal government was cutting these programs that support communities that are most in need of having alternatives to reliance on fossil fuels, that are least well able to find alternatives because we are not connected to the grid, we are on non-road communities. So I'm more than happy to give all my reasons why I thought this was a not very intuitive choice, but I don't control the federal government or what they choose to fund or not fund. I do want to assure the member that under the Arctic Energy Alliance's series of some of the core programs, the Alternative Energy Technologies Program, biomass, commercial energy conservation and efficiency, core funding to Arctic Energy Alliance, energy efficiency incentive program, energy rating services program, all of that funding is still there. It has, the proposal that we have forward here is not to change that from 24-25. It's just that we are struggling in terms of finding the funding for other things that were previously funded under the Low Carbon Economy Leaders Fund. And again, I certainly can ask, but right now Ottawa is a difficult place to be going to do some advocating. There's obviously a bit of political change perhaps on the horizon. So we'll see what comes next and then adjust our strategy accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just pondering the answer a bit. Yeah, I hear what the minister's saying. I know that it's difficult to obtain funding, and certainly I did note that most of the core funding for Arctic Energy Alliance is still there. And I know it's tough when the federal government takes things away, and that we can't always continue every single program that the federal government gives us money for. But again, would just note, if we have to use territorial money for something particularly related to climate change, what I want to see that money going towards is programs like this that have that twin benefit of helping low income, particularly families, reduce their cost of living and reducing carbon. Just noting that, these are the things that impact people the most. And I think when I think about, the implementation of the carbon tax over the years, which certainly was imposed on us, I think the most just way to deal with that and to handle that money would be to put it back in people's pockets and put it towards programs that help them reduce their costs and get off of these expensive heating sources. Thank you. Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed the last part. Go back to the member from Frame Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I was finished. If the minister wants to respond, I was really just overemphasizing the point, but just wanted to again note my support for taking territorial money and using it to help territorial residents convert off of these expensive fossil fuels. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So again, Mr. Chair, for this year's budget, there's the core programs do remain there with respect to future funding or future initiatives. Obviously, any future initiatives come through a business planning process for 26-27, and comments duly noted. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, my first question, the item called NWT Energy Efficiency Projects, it looks in the description that this only funds the Northwest Territories Power Corporation to do internal projects related to its power plants. I also note that there used to be a funding program that was delivered, I believe, by Arctic Energy Alliance, offering community governments money to do retrofits and often increase energy efficiency in their buildings. Has the government considered expanding its funding for energy efficiency projects beyond Power Corporation assets? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, yeah, so this particular line item that was pointed to is specific to Northwest Territories Power Corporation to help integrate the programs and projects that may exist in communities. But, Mr. Chair, a lot of work does happen in the Energy and Strategic Initiatives Division with respect to some of the planning. So, for example, the microhydro that was mentioned earlier, the possibility of SMRs. Efforts in that space happen within this division, so the staff that are employed there through this proposed budget are the same staff that would be helping to do some of the initial scoping for projects like this. The earlier and the more often that we can have conversations with communities, Delaney is a good example where they've looked to bring on additional assets, which requires looking at what we can do at the Power Corporation, but also can involve the department in terms of ensuring that when the pieces are being put together of what their energy requirements are going to be, what is available, what can the department do, what can NTPC do, what can NT Energy do. That does reside in this division. So, it's not necessarily under these individual string of programs or pots that you might find it. It may well be in the actual day-to-day functioning of the department and the staff there who are tasked with ensuring that we're advancing strategic and energy initiatives. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so currently, if there are community governments that want to maintain and upgrade their own buildings and assets, make them more energy efficient, is there somewhere that they can go for help finding money for retrofits? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, as a first point of call, I would certainly suggest that this division of the department is certainly one to speak to. I would also suggest the NT Energy folks, who are the sort of strategic branch of NTPC, is also a good point of call. As for any particular funding pot, if I may, I might turn it to Amy Burt and see if she can point us to something quickly, and if not, we'll take it under a commitment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do have the Community Renewable Energy Program that is administered by Arctic Energy Alliance, so there's $100,000 worth of funding there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to turn to the programs around electric vehicles. I know that one of the commitments in the business plan is to create charging corridors, and there is still a little tiny bit of money under that line item for the electric vehicles fast charger corridor. However, this year, all of the money for the electric vehicles rebate program looks like has been eliminated. And committee heard previously that the electric vehicle rebate program was one of the most effective programs for actually just reducing greenhouse gas emissions that we have. So I guess my question to the minister is, if we're not supporting people to change to electric vehicles, but who do we expect is going to be using the charging corridor that we have spent a whole bunch of money and are continuing to prioritize if we don't have people with the vehicles to actually use the corridor? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, there was certainly at the time that our main estimates were being prepared still a federal program to support consumer choice, then to try to incentivize consumer choice towards energy or EV vehicles. Mr. Chair, what we did commit to in our business plan and what we are providing is the corridor so that people can actually charge those vehicles. And I can say that from Yellowknife all the way to the Alberta border and over all the way to Fort Smith, there is indeed going to be an EV charging corridor. It will be complete this year. And so while I can't necessarily provide public dollars and additional public dollars in this budget to sway people if they don't want to spend the additional money on an EV vehicle, an electric vehicle, Mr. Chair, what we can do is ensure that for those people who are making that choice, that they actually can charge that vehicle, because that certainly was one of the concerns that had been raised, is that indeed folks wouldn't want to make this investment if they were concerned that they wouldn't be able to drive. So we have completed that side of it. Again, with respect to additional money, there are those, again, federal programs exist, and people may make those choices regardless. They may make those choices too if fuel prices remain volatile, which is also out of our control. But again, we have provided the infrastructure necessary to support those choices. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now, I know that owners of electric vehicles tend to be, wealthier members of our communities. But I wanted to also highlight, so the program for the low-income program to address energy poverty, it's only $200,000. First, I wanted to ask, is this based on applications that like individual people have to apply to get something under this program, or is it based on a certain project or a certain community that the government decides, okay, we're going to allocate this money this year to, one project in one community? Can the minister just clarify how that money is spent, how decisions are made to spend that money? Is it an application or on specific projects? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, this is a program that is administered by the Arctic Energy Alliance with respect to its individualized functioning at that stage. I'm not well placed necessarily to describe how AEA administers it. I'm happy to commit to getting that detail. We provide this fund, and I know there would be some expectations surrounding its use, but again, I'll have to make a commitment to bring that back here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate that, and I would request too that the minister helps us understand or finds out, is the program fully subscribed? If it's based on applications, are we even coming close to meeting the demand, or is there a much higher demand than we're able to satisfy with the 200,000 allocation? I'd appreciate that information coming back to us. I was going to turn to questions about some of the bigger strategic energy infrastructure projects that this government is undertaking that I don't see specifically listed here under energy and strategic initiatives. So, for example, the Charleston expansion pre-construction phase, I know we see that we're receiving in revenues $7.1 million, I assume from the federal government, to keep working on that. I don't see specific mention of it in the energy and strategic initiatives. So is there any GNBT money also being spent on the Charleston expansion work, the pre-construction work? Does it, are there staff that are listed in this section who are working on that project, or is it completely separate from everything we see here under energy and strategic initiatives? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, there certainly are staff within the division that are working on this, from the Assistant Deputy Minister through to folks who, the Director of Energy, Director of Strategic Energy Initiatives. I think I'm probably going to get his title wrong, but folks have traveled recently with me to Little Cay to attend the steering committee. When we see under the Energy and Strategic Initiatives compensation benefits, those folks are working on the Charleston Initiative. With respect to money that is used to support the Indigenous governments from the watershed region and north and south of the lake with their traditional knowledge studies and assisting them with the capacity to attend steering committee meetings and be prepared for those steering committee meetings, that type of funding is fully funded by CERNEC. That's the additional funding that we do see come in specific to Charleston. There's I guess in that sense, there's 100% funding from the feds to do the very project-specific work, but staff within this division whose money and whose functionality, if you will, does get funded here, and that is supporting the Charleston work as well as some of the other major capital projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other members that have questions? Going to the member from Bonfui.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With the biomass here, biomass energy, I know there's a lot of communities, with the high cost of living, there are some communities, especially flying communities, that use diesel generator. be cheaper in the long run. So I just wanted to ask the minister if that department is working with communities, especially the flying communities where they would like to, have an option to choose either the diesel generator and or biomass for heating source. Because I know we have that in one of our communities, and I heard that it is very efficient. So I just wanted to know if the department is working with other small communities that maybe would like to change from using diesel generator to biomass. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, yes, I can assure the member of the House that there is a lot of interest in this area. It is not only under the biomass energy line item, which is a program again administered by Arctic Energy Alliance and which was fully subscribed. Mr. Chair, there is also work that happens within our asset management division, and I know we'll get there at another point in time, but it is relevant to this question. There's that crossover here where this division does also support communities in their efforts. So we do have other funding that comes in under the Greenhouse Gas Grant Program. We have our own capital asset retrofit. And so, for instance, the Department of Infrastructure with our own forces are able to support, for example, the Wati Health Centre, Petchko's long-term care facility, for example, both switched over to biomass plants. So the short answer is yes, there's work happening in this space, and that, again, there can be then funds available through, whether it's through our department in kind, and then whether it's with support to other federal funding arrangements that are working to support small communities with biomass. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go with the member from Moncrief.
Thank you. Thank you for the information. It says here, forced growth, Cleacho Winter Road contract. It's not lots, but forced growth. But that's from last fiscal year. Is it due to, can the minister explain why Cleacho Winter Road contract is on forced growth? Is it, I'm not too sure, maybe it's, because I know last winter season, we had a slow start due to climate change. Due to the environment, and this year I know Gamity Winter Road is open on time, but Wigwati is still not open. So I just wanted to know why the Cleacho Winter Road contract is on. There's forced growth, which is, and there's another section, contract services. Contract services. There's less that money allocated. It's less this year than previous year. So if the minister, and here we're doing forced growth, and then there's a reduction in contract services. If the minister can explain why there's a difference between the two. Thank you.
Before I go to the minister, I just want to point out that we're on page 283 on strategic initiative, but I'll just go to the minister and then I'll remind the member to, we're on page 283. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, happy to answer it, Mr. Chair. I realize that the question will come, so hopefully we'll just keep things moving. The Cleacho Winter Road contract has seen increases in the last couple of years, and I think the member was already getting to the situation, which is to say ongoing climate change conditions, ongoing supply chain challenges, ongoing labor force challenges, all of which are leading to an increase in the costs of building the winter roads. We do rely on the contractor, which does exist under the Cleacho Infrastructure Cooperation Agreement, and we do work with the Cleacho government as a partner on this, but as they experience challenges with their own costs, then that certainly will impact the costs that fall to the GNWT, and that if it's things that are unavoidable that meet the definition of forced growth, then that would be where this comes in. There was a previous contract. That contract came up for renewal, and that's why you'll see a change. So from what was under the previous contract to now, if there's a change in time, and at times when the contract is 3 years old and towards the end, if changes have happened, you can obviously also see it could come through for a supplementary appropriation. But when it's a forced growth, when there's an update of the contract, you'll see it come through as forced growth. I hope that's helpful, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the member from Monfrey.
Thank you. Thank you. So with that in mind, with the climate change, it's not just in my region, but it's all over where there's Winter Road exists. Winter Road exists. So I want to ask the minister if they are working with Klitschko government or community government of Gamity for a possible all-season road. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has been raised now on a couple of occasions. There's not an active plan underway at the moment for any all-season roads beyond the Wati all-season roads that came in, or the Klitschko all-season road that came into use just a few years ago. So again, at this moment in time, no. But again, I know it's been raised. What I would say the next major road in that area is probably with respect to the planning around the SGP, the Slave Geologic Province area, and I've heard suggestions that maybe there'd be a spur off of that, but this is all very much at really just an initial planning stage or initial scoping stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the member for the Monfrey.
Thank you. And then, according to the budget here that we have, staffing reduction. Can the minister explain where is this? Is it in all the? Where is this being taken place at? Like, I mean, especially the staffing reduction. Is it in Yellowknife or is it in small communities? Thank you.
I think I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, all positions that were reduced within the Department of Infrastructure were in Yellowknife, with one exception. There was an airport manager position in Hay River that had been vacant for several years, and that has also been eliminated for these main estimates. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the member from Monfrey.
Yeah, thank you. I have no more questions for this section now. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further questions from members? Okay, seeing none, we're going to continue on. No further questions. Please turn to page 281. Please turn page 275, Infrastructure, Energy and Strategic Initiatives, Operational Expenditure Summary, 2025-2026 main estimates, $10,290,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to programs and services, beginning on page 280 with information items on page 283. Are there any questions? No further questions. Please turn to page 281. Infrastructure programs and services, operational expenditure summary, 2025-2026 main estimates, $12,641,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Moving on to regional operations, beginning on page 284 with information items on page 286. Are there any questions? I'm going to go to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just so the minister knows, I'm going to ask her this every year. Will the minister please consider opening the DMV in Yellowknife on Saturdays? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
I suppose someone has to ask it, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the issue surrounding there is, with respect to more ensuring that we have staff available to undertake that request. And I can take it back away and look again at what some of those challenges of staffing were. What we have done and continue to do, Mr. Chair, is that there are more and more services coming available for e-services. I recognize before I even turn this back over that some folks will not be able to access e-services or won't be comfortable with e-services. But that certainly is an area that is taking a lot of the pressure off of the in-person times that are available. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for committing to look at it a little closer. Mr. Chair, the Minister is right. There are lots of people who might not feel comfortable doing those services online, but I also want to recognize that I very much enjoy the services that you can do online for your vehicle are very helpful indeed for the folks who can use them. However, we cannot get a new driver's license online, and there are services that newcomers need to extend driver's licenses in the sense of their work visas expiring and then being put into maintenance by the federal government. So I would urge the Minister to consider those in her deliberations. But getting to questions, I will change topics. I was very pleased when the folks from the Yellowknife Airport gave a presentation to Sketty in, I believe, the last 6 months or so. The revolving fund is a success story, I think by all accounts, and the surplus continues to grow. So does the Minister, her department, have plans for the $52 million surplus budgeted for 25-26? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, there's, I know, some movement in this space with respect to a capital plan coming out of the airport in, I think in just in the next couple of months, or next few months anyways. I'm not sure, perhaps Mr. Luditt may have, or Deputy Minister Luditt may have more details on whether or not, or to what extent that includes the revolving fund. Thank you.
I'll go to the Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we do have a list of projects that we are undertaking under the capital program with the revolving fund. There's actually I don't have them right at my fingertips, but the accumulated surplus is not as large as it does appear. A lot of it is the assets, and some of it is an accumulation of funds. So, well, it says that there's $37 million are the assets involved with the airport. So it's not money that can be spent on anything, but we are doing quite a few things to improve both the customer experience and the I guess working conditions for the airport. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Great Slave.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if the Minister can commit to providing a more detailed breakdown to committee on the surplus and its activities that are planned. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, happy to do so. Again, that work is sort of due back this spring, and it would normally follow the process of going to committee. I'm happy to ensure that we are there as early as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Great Slave.
Nothing further for me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from the SOT2.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking on page 290 on the MTS revolving fund. We're going to be projecting a loss here again. Having the experiences of several years in losses, what types of actions of recovery or reduction measures are being taken by the MTS operation? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, there certainly has been several years of challenge in this space. There's, obviously when the water levels are low, not only does it impact on the revenue that we would normally bring in, but we then also wind up incurring the higher costs to ensure resupply still is completed. So a bit of a double hit in that respect. Some of the things, though, that are happening in this space, Mr. Chair, there has been a governance review completed, and I know we've had the opportunity, as mentioned, to be in front of committee on this. It's examining what kind of structure would best help deliver the services that MTS provides, wanting to ensure that those services remain available and that even in times where there would be losses, that those essential services are provided, but also trying to see if there's a path by which we can do so that will hopefully find some efficiencies, increase the opportunity to bring in revenue, And again, I think over the next year, or that the hope is that we will over the next year see that governance, those governance changes put into place, and hopefully some resulting economic benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the Sawtooth.
I'm glad the department is looking at the governance review, and I would probably suggest what types of downsizing measures is land disposition being looked at? Are you downsizing the assets, the land, the footprint to shrink your operating cost? Is some of the redundant assets being looked at maybe on the international community as selling them off? Those types of actions on reductions there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, at this point in time, I'm gonna have to take that one away and commit to getting back to the member, but it may not be me. It may actually be as the governance changeover takes place. Our hope is that as that unfolds, part of that will look at what makes the operations more efficient, and really that might be an opportunity to do some downsizing or to change assets. But Mr. Chair, part of the governance review is to question whether or how to have the right people there making those decisions. And I'm not trying to be vague, Mr. Chair, but simply just that there's going to be some changes in the next few months in this space, and want to give the right latitude for those coming in to make those strategic decisions. Again, happy to come back and continue to update committees so that folks who are in the regions can provide their feedback and updates as sort of some leadership comes in and steps in, and make sure that that leadership in the MTS space is continuing to be engaged with opportunities for those who know that space well. So I think really it's a matter of, I will just simply commit that we'll continue to come back as the leadership at MTS is confirmed and solidified. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from the Sawtooth.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks to the Minister for that reply. Although I really want to see this operation continue on a break-even point, I really need the barge in my areas there too, but we're all subject to climate change and the impacts and implications of that action. So I look forward to the continuing governance review. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next on my list, I got the member from Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, this may be a bit of a stretch. I'm not sure if this is the property department, but in the House, my member statement around the new building standards code for the for Northwest Territories, or not a new one, because we don't have one. And I thought that I guess it is kind of it's delivering capital, Mr. Chair. So I don't know if the minister, now that she has her A team here with her, would like to maybe elaborate a little more on on where we are with that, and anticipating getting that work done, funded and done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to turn it to the A team. Let me start with Deputy Minister Ludick, please.
Thank you. I'll go to the Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is a project, obviously, the member's correct, that this is a project that needs to happen. We need to get the standard in place, and we right now have a working group, and we're looking at how we're going to, what kind of funding we're going to need to accomplish this, and we're hoping to do it in the life of this assembly. It's one of the, but at this point we don't have the financial resources or the HR resources to tackle it, but we're in the planning stages for the program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I want to go back to the member from the Sawtooth. Yeah. Nunavut Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's okay. We're very similar. Close. A lot of the same issues. Any estimation, Mr. Chair, on what kind of financial resources this would need, as well as maybe what kind of staffing requirements, how big a department this would be? I guess not the department itself, but how big this would be. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mr. Chair, no, I don't have that yet. But again, really this is something where there's already these existing pieces of the framework of the National Building Code that exist that we already apply at the GNWT. So bringing that in and making it one that can be put into legislation that can be applied more broadly really should be manageable at this point. We're hopeful within the capacity that we have to put it in place. And then as far as putting our inspectors out, Mr. Chair, again, Mr. Inspectors already are out inspecting buildings, but they're doing so without the benefit of having a unified and singular piece of legislation. So, hopefully this doesn't necessarily require new, it may require some training once we are rolling out, but hopeful that it won't bring about a significant increase in budgetary demands. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Nunavut-Bootleague.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that. I appreciate that work is ongoing, and I appreciate as the Deputy Minister said, that there's a firm commitment to getting this work done, and I'm sure a lot of contractors and a lot of builders in the territory would be happy to see that. Just switching for a minute on some of the capital work, and I again, if I'm stretching, that's fine. Someone can tell me. But on the in MTS, I know we did have that one-time contribution, $14 million. I know that's not budgeted now. Are we happy? Are we confident with the number going in, considering what happened last year with low water, that we are adequately funded there through infrastructure to make sure that they were able to deliver this important service? Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So that was a one-time contribution because of the losses that arose from having a low water season. Now, we are planning this year around low water from the perspective of our Fuel Services Division and ensuring that we bring a full 100% value of fuel into those communities that would have otherwise depended upon reservicing, certainly in the Sawtooth, from having the barges on the anticipation that we may face, again, a low water season. The high Arctic communities are not expected at this point to require anything other than barging, and so in that sense we would have the adequate resources planned for, similar to the last couple of years where we would rely on coming either around the top or up the Dempster Highway. As for what might befall us this summer and whether any barges will get through or if not, again, without knowing that in advance, Mr. Chair, I can't say for sure. We are, I know that the Director of MTS has had some discussions with mayors who are impacted to make sure that we've got an awareness of the needs and a plan to service them. Whether it will cost more than what is planned for, unfortunately, Mr. Chair, beyond saying that we will commit to making sure those communities have their resupply in advance without knowing what we face from Mother Nature, I can't give a definite of effectively whether we're going to be back for a sup or not. Our hope is not. Our hope is that by providing the 100% resupply of fuel that we won't be. But again, we'll have to unfortunately wait and see what's thrown at us. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Nunavut-Bootleague.
I appreciate we can't unfortunately see into the future. As they say, hope and pray. I opt for the pray rather than the hope. So let's hopefully we'll pray we get it there. Just one final one on the Inuit Highway, and I know there were some issues there around some of the low areas in that highway. I know it did cause some grief, and it wasn't the only reason, but certainly some grief with the additional snow that we'd had up there. And I know that the ministers were working with the contractors up there. There's a contract in place to ensure. So are we again now comfortable going into this season that we're able to get those that road adequately repaired so we don't deal with those low areas that cause both flooding and additional snow build up there, Mr. Chair?
Thank you. I'll go with the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is indeed a capital project, but I am happy to say after quite a bit of effort on both sides, Mr. Chair, we do now have contracts in place both for the operations and maintenance as well as to undertake the much waited for and anticipated capital upgrades. Both of those came in the fall of 2024, which means that by this construction season, we will see the upgrades beginning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to go to the member from Nunavut Lake.
Mr. Chair, thank the ministers and the Deputy Minister and Assistant Deputy Minister for those answers. Certainly appreciate that, and wish Mr. Lutek good luck in his retirement when he's not have to sit here and deal with this anymore. No more questions, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to go to the member from Monfrey.
Thank you. Here, facilities management, there was an increase, from 23-24, the increase in the budget has been consistent. So if the minister can explain what is causing these, why there's increase in these costs. So what is causing it? Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, let me see if the Deputy Minister wants to take this, and if not, we might.
I didn't catch the beginning.
Let's send this to Ms. Burke, please.
Thank you. I'll go to the director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to confirm, we're looking at page 285 and we're talking about facilities management. So in 2023-24, there was actuals of 28 million. And then for our budget this year, it's the 33,000. Is that what the member is asking about? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Monfrey.
Yeah, there's increase from 23-24 up to the current. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go back to the director.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The increases that the member is seeing there is related to the UNW collective agreement. There is a number of employees for Department of Infrastructure that report in under the Facility Management Division. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go back to the member from Monfrey.
In small communities, we have lots of aging infrastructures. Even in Bichako, in Edzo, we had water line issues while I was still there when I was part of the Community Government Council. And it was estimated it was over $10 million to replace the water line. And then we have lots of other infrastructures that are aging, like due to wear and tear and climate change. I'm sure there were other community governments, they might have highlighted that. So that's why I'm asking why, So with that in mind, I just want to ask the minister how much of that is being spent in Cleacho region. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, Mr. Chair, with respect to what this is funding, it is specific to GNWT assets and GNWT infrastructure, so that wouldn't necessarily extend to infrastructure that is specific to a community government infrastructure or anything owned by an Indigenous government, for example. It would really only be infrastructure or for GNWT owned. A breakdown, I know I have provided with respect when we do the capital planning, we do provide some breakdown by region, including by Cleacho region, but I don't have that here to identify how much of these facilities specifically are within the Cleacho region. I think we may be able to get that. I'll certainly make a best effort, and if I can, I will then provide it to the member. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Monfrey.
Yes, and then to regional projects as well, there is an increase from 23-24 too. So the minister can explain what those projects are in the regions, like even, for example, start with Cleacho region. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the regional projects, Mr. Chair, these are not the changes that you're seeing to the 25-26 main estimates in particular is simply with respect to adjustments due to the collective agreement. That's for between 24-25 and 25-26. The increase is due exclusively to collective agreement changes. Thank you. Oh, and sorry, and again, with respect to the staff employed in the Cleacho region, Mr. Chair, under regional operations, we have 9 full-time equivalent staff in the Cleacho region. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Longwy.
Okay, thank you. That's it for this section. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to go to the member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions is related to highway operations. We see a increase from 2023 to 2024 actuals of 107 million to 109. How much of this is geared toward the upgrade or maintenance of the Dempster Highway between, let's say, Sigachik and Inuvik? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I mean, the money, I'd have to take that away in order to ensure that I'm breaking it down by the right dollar values. I'm not sure if anyone would have that available here. The change, sorry, let me start by actually answering the question. The change in budget, again, is related to the change in the collective agreement. So it's increased through force growth because the collective agreement went up. And predominantly that is the main source of change here. And then I'd be more than happy to provide the specifics of, I'm sorry, I'm trying to find it as I'm speaking, but I don't know that that's the most efficient way to do this. So let me make sure that I can provide a breakdown of what we have in our budget year over year for that particular highway, stretch of highway. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to the member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Carrying on with highway operations, in the fall of 2024, they didn't have much time, or they did not complete the upgrade or maintenance of the highway section between Wrangling River and Inuvik, specifically talking about Wrangling River, where there's that danger zone there. Was there a carryover from last year's fall of last year to this year's estimates so that work can be conducted this year? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Chair, there is indeed now some money there that is available for this stretch of highway. There's tender packages are being prepared to be ready in time to be out for this construction season. There's about 18 million in total for this entire stretch of highway between now and 27-28. So it's over a course of a number of years that really from the border through on the entire stretch of the Highway 8. So as far as breaking it down beyond that, I would perhaps want to just ensure that we are doing so in a way that aligns up with the timing of the contracts and doesn't interfere with the procurement process. But again, we do at this point have an expectation that we'll be going out in time for this construction season to start to see some of that money flow out the door. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going on to winter roads, I see a modest increase from 2023 to 2024 actuals to 25-26 main estimates. In my region, we have one winter road that goes from Inuvik to Aklavik, and the access roads from Sigachik and the Peel River crossings. Has there been some due to climate change and the opening of the roads at a later date and closing earlier? Has there been any reference to this in the increase in the budget to the actuals to the main estimates? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, at this point, the changes in the winter road budget at this point in time related to the Mackenzie Valley Winter Road stretch and the Cleacho Winter Roads. In no small part, the Cleacho Winter Road, for example, that contract was for 3 years and came due for its renewal. And so with that new process of contractual review and engagement, that would then lead to the change here. There is, if I'm not mistaken, a contract in place right now for the winter roads within the Beaufort Delta regions broadly. So when that does come up, it may well be, and frankly almost certainly seems to be, that when that contract comes due, that we would then have to look at whether or not there needs to be a change. And, again, not wanting to presume the conclusion or encourage, but the fact of the climate change impacts is making it more difficult for contractors to provide those services, and that then does impact the contract that we come forward with, which you then would see for next year. I believe that contract will be up by next year, so if there's going to be a change, it will show up on the 26-27 operations budget. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go back to the member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regional projects, there's an increase from 23-24 actuals to the 25-26 main estimates. There's an increase there. The Mackenzie Delta region has seen very little in terms of big capital projects. Is there anything to look forward to within this area here for any of the three communities in my riding? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this increase is fairly modest, just over $300,000 here, and it's again related only to the collective agreement. However, Mr. Chair, with respect to our capital plan that we are expecting to be delivering over the next year, we do have the James Creek Maintenance Camp Rehabilitation Project that is coming out of Fort McPherson region, and that one is expected to move forward over the next coming year. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the member from Mackenzie Delta.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Next on my list I have is the member from Satu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Complimentary to this budget when it gets passed. And it's such a huge department with a lot of benefits. And as we are going to be approaching our summer student hiring season, can the minister, not at this point in time, but at some point in time, and when time permits, provide a student summer employment program with all positions? I see in here there's, not including the subcontractors or the contractors, you get 280 part-time and full-time positions. So it's a huge department to look at shadowing positions, SNAP positions, summer student positions. So if we can get a labor market plan to explain the summer employment benefits and apprenticeship benefits of this budget. And I also must join my friend from Inuvik Boot Lake in wishing Stephen Ludet, the Deputy Minister, a happy retirement. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the summer student call, I believe, has gone out already. And very happy to have the chance to encourage potential summer students who may be eligible to reach out to the department. It's a bit of a two-part process where obviously departments create these summer student positions and can then go to the Department of Finance and access the bank of names of persons who have contacted and put themselves forward. But to the extent that a student may have an area of interest, an area of expertise, an area of training, an apprentice, if they're talking to the folks in the Department of Infrastructure and it can certainly say, look, I have these skills to bring you, it can help make it easier for us to say, look, that we know there's a project that we can open up to a student. So it's a bit, people can certainly apply, just putting their names forward to finance. They will do their best to match, and indeed we tend to have over 300 students in the last couple of years, if I recall correctly. But making those connections earlier and often is also helpful. So, through MLAs is also a good opportunity to identify what projects are underway. I took the member's question with respect to being a bit beyond that and a labour market plan for the department. I would reference our Indigenous recruitment and retention, Indigenous employment plans. That does show some of the different types of positions that where we're hoping to bring in more Indigenous employees. And certainly some of the communities tend to have a higher proportion of Indigenous persons eligible and interested and available to join the public service. So it's a lot of opportunities here to see where we see those numbers of availability, but then also, as I said, to try and connect in under the summer student program. So can certainly follow up directly if there's some more information I can provide about what kind of projects there are, or if there's some information we can get out to the community, to students, to summer students, to incoming apprentices, all of it. The more we are making those, as I said, we'll see what we can get to the member and really to the House to help encourage people to apply. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Next on my list I have is the member from Yellowknife North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a few questions about the business plans, and I feel like this is as good an item as any to address them in. They probably touch on several, but one of the goals in the business plan is to undertake regular evaluation of programs and services to ensure cost efficiency, and to have a mechanism for regularly reviewing and updating infrastructure fees and roles. And it looks like the goal is to review 2 programs each year. Can the minister explain what are the 2 programs that have been chosen for review this year and why those were determined to be the highest priority programs to review? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll perhaps turn to the Deputy Minister in just a moment, but let me at least give a bit of introduction that the 2 for this year, for this fiscal, are the deferred maintenance program. So that is where we undertake ongoing repairs to Genuity assets over the life of that particular asset or building. It's more under our capital estimates program, but we want to ensure that, of course, we are maintaining those assets on an adequate life cycle. Right now, there tend to be somewhere between 30 and 50-year life cycle, depending on the type of building or type of assets. So wanting to make sure we're doing that in the most efficient way to expend the money that we have and maintain the assets that we have for as long as possible. Second program, Mr. Chair, the driver and vehicle licensing services. So perhaps this is the space where someone might ask me again about weekends openings, but this is again a review of what kind of services we offer to residents: ID cards, licenses, registrations, etc. The online services that we're moving to, in-person services, what's working and what is not, and what we could potentially do better. But Mr. Chair, again, these are very operational, so let's make sure I haven't missed anything with the deputy, please.
Thank you. I'll go to the Deputy Minister.
So, thank you, Mr. Chair. At this point, we haven't determined which programs we're going to be looking at for 25-26. We're going to have to review our program inventory and prioritize on the matrix guided by MBS. We also still have good work to do on our 2. The Department of Infrastructure has approximately between 22 and, depending how you count it, 22 to 30 business lines. So we have a lot of different areas that we'd like to focus this on. So we have to figure out, when you're only doing 2 a year and with limited resources, we have to figure out which 2 are going to make the biggest impacts to the public. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go back to the member from Yellowknife North.
Okay, thank you to the Minister and her staff for that, and perhaps if members have suggestions or ideas, we could communicate that to the Minister as to what programs could be evaluated next. Very exciting. We know what one member would prefer. Just to follow up on my colleagues' questions about the SNAPS students and apprenticeship opportunities, I know that we have goals in the business plan of I guess the department itself, or maybe the department funded projects, hiring 10 apprentices and 5 SNAP students. Is there something different in terms of a requirement that's been applied now than has happened in the past? I know, the department has had students occasionally in the past working. Have we done something different in order to ensure we're able to find more apprentices or students or create more opportunities for them? Or are we just sort of carrying on and still hoping that we'll be able to meet these targets? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the challenge with SNAP students specifically, which is an area that is, has an opportunity for growth, is that these students are under casual contracts, which means that they can't be, that they have to be rehired after a period of time. But I think there has been some recent movement on that. I'll perhaps suggest, I'll turn it to the Deputy to speak that a little bit further, please.
Thank you. I'll go to the Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we are meeting next week with ECE, and we've been talking to Finance as well, HR, to determine how we're going to be able to fund this. I think it's a very important project. The SNAP students, like our apprentices, are investing in Northerners, so it's something that's very dear to our hearts. And perhaps we're approaching the UNW with an MOU on how we're going to deal with casual employees, so we don't have to break a service and can continue educating. I think that's something obviously the UNW would probably be wanting to help support us on, and I think it's something we all believe is a good value for the Northwest Territories. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll go to the member from Yellowknife North.
Okay, thanks for that update. That's great to know what some of the barriers are, but also what work is being done to move through it, as I think we can all agree that getting more people into the workforce is one of our highest priorities in this Assembly, and apprenticeships and things like the SNAP program can be great ways to do that. I'll leave it there for now. I have a question about a few of the information items, but I'm hoping we'll have a chance to ask a few questions about that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is there any further questions from members? No further questions. Please turn to page 285. Infrastructure Regional Operations Expenditure Summary, 2025-2026 main estimates, $258,033,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. There are additional information items on page 287 to 295. Are there any questions? Thank you, members. Please return now to departmental summary found on page 261 with information items on page 262 to 266. Are there any questions? Seeing no further questions, committee, I will now call on the departmental summary infrastructure operational expenditure total department 2025-2026 main estimates, $308,403,000. Does the committee agree? Thank you. Committee, I'd like to turn over to the minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, some of my colleagues have already taken my thunder away here a little bit, but I did want to point out that I have had the pleasure of working with Deputy Minister Lutit for some time, and he has, for the last several days or weeks, been counting down his very favorite time of the year, which is session. But unfortunately this year he's counting it down because after 29 years of public service, Mr. Lutit is retiring next Friday.
Thank you. I just want to say that I want to wish the Deputy Minister as well happy retirement. And when we were young and good looking, we used to play hockey together. And so I know he's now, we'll just watch it on TV. Thank you very much. So, thank you, Minister, and thank you to the witnesses for appearing before us. Sergeant Arms? Oh, I'm sorry, Sergeant Arms, please escort the witnesses from the chambers. I want to wish the committee, a member from the Nuvik Boot Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I move the chair rise and report progress. Thank you.
Thank you. I will rise and report. The motion's in order. The motion is non-debatable. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. I will now rise and report progress. Thank you.
From Tuniday Williday.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The committee has been considering table documents 275-20(1) and would like to report progress. And Mr. Speaker, I move the report of the committee of the whole be concurred with. Thank you.
Thank you, member from Tuniday Williday. Can I have a seconder, please? I'll pick my favorite minister today, member from Yellowknife South. All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carried unanimously. There was no recorded vote. Reports in committee of the whole, reports in committee of the whole. Third reading of bills. Member of Infrastructure, Minister of Infrastructure.
Mr. Speaker, I move, seconded by the honourable member for Thabatcha, that Bill 11, an act to amend the Motor Vehicles Act, be read for the third time. Mr. Speaker, I would request a recorded vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The motion is in order. To the motion. Question hasn't been called, and the minister has asked for a recorded vote. All those in favor, please stand.
The member for Yellowknife South. The member for Hay River South, the member for Inuvik Twin Lakes, the member for Nunaput, the member for Tuniday Williday, the member for Satu, the member for Range Lake, the member for Inuvik Boot Lake, the member for Montfouille, the member for Frame Lake, the member for Great Slave, the member for Mackenzie Delta, the member for Yellowknife North, the member for Thabatcha.
All those opposed, please stand. All those abstention, please stand. Colleagues, the recorded vote, 14 in favor, 0 opposed, and 0 abstentions. The motion is carried. Bill 11 has had its third reading. Third reading of bills, third reading of bills. Orders of the day, Mr. Clerk.
Merci, Mr. Speaker. Orders of the day for Tuesday, March 4th, 2025 at 1:30 p.m. Prayer or reflection. Minister statements, member statements, recognition of visitors in the gallery, reports of committees on the review of bills, reports of standing and special committees, returns to oral questions, oral question 530-20(1), acknowledgements, oral questions, written questions, returns to written questions, replies to the Commissioner's address, petitions, tabling of documents, notices of motion, motions, notice of motions for first reading of bills, first reading of bills, second reading of bills, consideration in committee of the whole of bills and other matters, table document 275-20(1), report of committee of the whole, third reading of bills, orders of the day. Merci, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. This House stands adjourned till Tuesday, March 4th, 2025 at 1:30 p.m.
Order.